Look how they got us, fighting against each other. This is a lose-lose situation for us. It's exactly what they want. It's more conquer and divide tactics. They want us pointing the finger at cops, dirty politicians, paid off doctors, people who are for the shot, people who are against the shot, people who like the color blue, people who like the color red, the filthy, lying, fear-mongering mainstream media, even at the pharmaceutical parasites and the liability-free manufacturers of the shot. But never, never at them, the wizards behind the curtain. I say we overlook all that small shit. Go straight to the source. We'll dispose of the body once we cut the head off the snake. We the people.
Gente, take a moment to subscribe to Cafecito Break. Suscríbete familia que nosotros estamos aquí presentes.
All right, mi gente, welcome back. And earlier today, we hosted a space on X with Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond, and it was around the cover-up, the assassination attempt around that happened with Donald Trump. A lot of people on all sides of the aisle, from all perspectives, have a lot of questions, and depending on the media source that you tune into, you may not feel satisfied with the level of information that's being reported. Maybe you have more questions, as we did. And thank God for curious minds. Thank God for the way things work. Michael Kane of Teachers for Choice, he wrote a Substack in which he included some of his questions and also a video that was created and by Ryan Christian, and there were I'm not sure what was one of his original shows, but the conversation was around the cover up and questions that were happening, and the way the news cycles move so fast, and the way things seem to disappear from the internet sphere so quickly. We have a lot of questions, and unfortunately, I had a tech glitch. I don't know if it was sabotage or just like a little glitch, because I do know Spaces glitch. But for some reason, I wasn't able to go live on Cafecito Break. And that was a little sad because we had advertised, sent this to thousands of people between Michael and Cafecito Break and Ryan Christian, who were sharing it. Anyway, I'm going to land my little mouth over here. And are you ready for the replay? Give everyone a follow. This is a conversation, like I said, that took place much earlier hosted by myself, yours truly, Ralph. Cafecito Break. We're an independent platform based in Brooklyn with indie and corporate media experience, former MTV, VH1, BET producer. And I hosted the space with Michael Kane of Teachers for Choice and our special guest, Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond. All right, mi gente. Thank you for joining me, and let's check out this replay.
Okay, here we are. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Kane, and we're starting up a Twitter space here. We're having a real hard time getting going, but this is to discuss the ongoing cover around the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, featuring Ryan Christian with The Last American Vagabond. Rosangel Perez was trying to get this going with the Twitter spaces that she does all the time, regularly, and three times she was trying to set it up and it wasn't allowing her to do so. So we're not really sure what's going on. But it is possible that this conversation is trying to be suppressed. Hopefully that's not it. Hopefully there's just some technical difficulties. That does happen. That does happen on Twitter Spaces. That's true, but it is interesting because some of you might not know this, but the whole reason this started was that Ryan's investigation into what happened on the assassination attempt of Trump really caught my attention. I pushed it out in a major way because it was one of the few investigations that I saw wasn't making conclusions from the beginning. It wasn't trying to say they knew precisely what was happening. It said, no, there's tons of questions and we need to falsify which ones of these we can throw away, and we need to prove which ones we can prove, and not make assumptions. And that really, really caught my attention. And so I think that Rose Angel has invited Ryan on here. Please bear with me as I am now the host of this.
Have invited. I'm not sure if our spaces are getting sabotaged because Michael, I'm hearing you cutting in and out. I do remember Ryan mentioning a thing or two about not being surprised that tech glitches happen around him. As you know, and Cozy is here, who is, oh my God, oh, thank God he's here. Please invite him as a speaker. He's just tuned in. Thank you, Ryan. So as Cozy knows, who's listening in, we host these spaces all of the time, and we just had one for over 3 hours last night. And Ryan, I tried to start the space 3 different times. I even tried to start it from my desktop, and I would get the weirdest message I never seen before yet on X. And then I tried to recreate a new space 2 more times after that, and it wouldn't allow me to do so. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for everyone. If you could take a moment to please update everyone as Michael and I and Ryan dive into this conversation. This is a hot topic because it's yet another instance in our lives where not only are we witnessing history, but we're also witnessing a polarization of people, which is why we felt it's so important to have this conversation, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. Rose Angel, can you hear me now? Rose Angel, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Okay, good.
Yes, I can. I can
So
hear you
yeah,
fine.
please push this out. We had a link that thousands and thousands of people had viewed and had set reminders for that got sabotaged somehow. Maybe it was just the technical glitches of X Spaces that happens. Maybe it was something else. But I'm going to briefly introduce myself and then really turn it over to Ryan because this is really, really focused on his research, which I think has been phenomenal because he has not made conclusions prior to investigation. I think that's so important. But just quickly, my name's Michael Kane. I'm the founder of a group called Teachers for Choice. I was a New York City public school teacher for over 14 years, and I was fired because I declined the COVID shot. And when that happened, we took it to the streets in New York City, the streets in Albany, the capital of New York, and we were backed by groups like Children's Health Defense, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and a whole network of grassroots people that spanned the political spectrum that just said no to these mandates. And that's kind of where my background comes from. And I founded this group, Teachers for Choice. And just last week or so, I was speaking to a good friend of mine named Kristen Elizabeth saying, where is the real research going on about what really happened with this assassination attempt with Trump? Is Whitney Webb doing anything? And she said, I would think so. But then I rightly went to The Last American Vagabond and saw that Ryan Christian, who founded that platform, was doing some amazing work. I pushed it out. Ryan noticed I was pushing out and thanked me. Rose Angel noticed and asked for, hey, maybe we can have a conversation about this. And I think it's really important that we jump into this conversation and let Ryan speak a little bit. Ryan, if you could unmute and hop in here. The first thing I wanted to just ask you is, before we get into like the meat of everything you've done already, have you come to any conclusions yet Are there things you're leaning towards leaning away now? Because you've done dozens and dozens of hours of research on this already. Can you just speak to today, July 23rd, 10 days out from the event that happened? Can you just tell us where you're leaning and what your research has taken you to thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting me. And I think it's important that we keep having these conversations and, in a nonpartisan, objective way. And I'd like to start before I even address that with, I think it's really important that we have this conversation today, or really any of these kind of conversations or any conversation, and that we set out to do this in a way that is not partisan and that is as objective as possible. There's a lot of assumption in this, and that's okay, right? They're in investigation. It is okay to lean into different theories and flesh them out, but we have to be sure that we're setting clear boundaries for what is provable, what is confirmed, what is likely, and what is something that we're simply just hypothesizing about. Which I think you all agree with, and that's why we're having this conversation. And I think that, like, even or starting with this spaces itself, it would not surprise me at all if this was something that was and uncomfortable. Anything objective and nonpartisan, I think, is something that is uncomfortable for the agendas from the two-party illusion. And so I think it wouldn't surprise me if this was censored or suppressed, but it's like, the point is we don't know, right? And so we'll do it again, set it up, and we'll move forward and try to do it that way. I think the whole thing is it's important that we're only leading into what we think we can prove. So on that very point, to start with the idea of what I think, what we have confirmed, what I think has been confirmed, I think what, in my opinion, has been confirmed is that there's been lies told. The narrative that was set out early on that was leaned into by both left and right, and I argue the higher levels of the paradigm, were completely dishonest. And I think that's a verifiable reality at this point. And one of the things that I'll definitely get into today is the angle of all this that I think really does highlight an obvious and self-evident inconsistency that could suggest that there was another shooter, which I think at the moment seems to be the most likely. It could suggest that this thing was not completely staged in the first place, which I don't think is the reality, but that's certainly possible. Or the idea that this was something that was ultimately manufactured for the benefit of the Trump campaign. Also, don't think the evidence at this point is pointing in that direction. But I think what's important is that it's obvious we can tell that there's been lies told. And what's also on top of that, what's important, is we can see that like we just saw with the hearings, Cheadle just resigned apparently, and all the different dynamics that we see partisan people within the Congress, senators, congressmen from all sides of politics trying to use this for their own benefit. And many things that were said during that congressional discussion were clearly and provably false, but not really pushed back on. So I think that I'm most aware of something that I think is an all-encompassing manipulation. So what I think we can confirm is that I think at this point, I even the word confirm, I think what I think is established at this point is that there was somebody that was killed on that roof. Whether or not that was the person that ultimately shot, or that Trump was shot and that was the person who shot it, I don't think that's been defined. I think it's obvious right now that there's inconsistencies with the shots that were fired from him, the recordings that show the shots fired from the other side and who actually fired the shot that killed him, and in the inconsistencies on what shot actually killed him. There's easily video breakdowns that show the narrative that we're being told about that is provably incorrect, at least with what was experienced from the people that were on the ground right next to that building, right? Or the idea is that we can see that there's many different examples of how people already clearly saw him, the level of suspicious nature around this person and why something would have been done. I think this all comes down to whether we ultimately think this was a deliberate attempt to take out Donald Trump. Then we would have to kind of get into how that would line up with multiple shooters and how one nick of his ear is how that ended up. It doesn't really make much sense. Anyway, I could go off. I'll go ahead and pin it right there, actually, for the minute. I guess my point would be that I think there's a lot mostly unconfirmed and a lot of assumption that's driving this conversation, but I think we can tell we're being lied to. And as usual, that's not something that's going to make people happy that want conclusions.
So Ryan, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here for this important conversation. I want to go into the thing that drew me into this, and some of your analysis blew me away. I had first asked the question and surprisingly got attacked for it. What happened to the bullet alleged to have hit Donald Trump's ear? This is a major crime scene. I would imagine there would be an investigation that would search for every bullet, every shell to find this. Why aren't reporters asking about that? And to my knowledge, I've seen no reporting, no curiosity, no anything asking about that bullet. And then one of the the best lines of investigation I've watched multiple times that you've done is about the line of the shot from Crooks on the roof to where Trump is. And you repeatedly, I believe in 3 different investigations I watched you streaming, had showed with very convincing evidence that there's no way Crooks could have been the person that fired that shot because he did not have the line, assuming it was a shot that hit his ear. As of today, on July 23rd, do you still hold that position? Do you think the evidence is moving more in your direction that way, less in your direction? Where do you stand about Crooks and the line of shot to Donald Trump?
Yeah, that I think to me so far, that's one of the most important aspects of breaking down that we're being lied to. But first, to your point about the bullet, I think that's an excellent question. And I think it highlights a couple of things, I think, in regard to how these go forward. I think first, we always have to remember that and this is my problem with how this always goes, whether it's media, the pundits online, or it's the level of politics and politicians themselves. Everyone's so focused on their agenda through what's happening, even if they believe what they're saying. And so it's interesting to see how this has gone forward, where I don't see the kind of earmarks of what you would normally see in an investigation anywhere, from spraying down the roofs and it's just really strange. There are people that are currently going out and making videos standing on top of that roof where he's shot from. I just saw it this morning, and they're supposedly still in an ongoing investigation. That's why she can't answer questions. That shockingly doesn't make any sense, right? So it's just very weird. So the bullet very well may be out there. Maybe somebody got it and doesn't care. There's this overlap to the person who asked for the pictures, the man in the gray suit, and that nobody knows where that went. Clearly, there's something going on if that's all accurate, and I have no reason to believe it's not. So it's just more as to the level of a cover-up. And that could be, and this is where it's important as well. We could be assuming into that's a cover-up hiding the fact that it was an attack on Trump's life, or it could be a cover-up that it wasn't even really there. And again, the evidence points in the direction of a shooting, but I just think it's important that I don't think any of that's definitively proven at this point. And it's dangerous for us to assume in those partisan ways. So the bullet would be an excellent thing to follow up on. What happened? Is it the same gun? Is the trajectory correct? All these things would be provable. I doubt we're ever really going to see that. And even if we do, it's hard to know that they're going to give you the correct information. That's the world we live in. The line is why I'm glad you started with that, because these are the kind of things, like the way I just laid that out, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable because nobody wants to address it in that full scope, because it makes you feel that maybe we'll never get an answer. And sometimes that is the way it goes. And we have to be able to accept that. But we're driven through partisanship and the current dynamic to not accept that we're supposed to pick a side, pick a camp, and just dig in. And that's what people tend to do. And so the problem with my point is that the angle of this are one of the dynamics in this that we can prove. There's no, we have satellite imagery. People can go there and look for themselves. We can line up where he was. We know that. We can line up where the Jumbotron is. We know where he's looking. We can line up the angle of the shot. Those are the kind of things that we should be leaning into. Now, we should consider everything. Consider the blurry image on a water tower and whether that turns out to be somebody or just heat on the roof or the tree, or, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's not defined. So to the angles, I think, and to that point, somebody who's been really going after the water tower angle, John Colin has been one of the people on the Dark Horse podcast that sort of got this conversation a lot more attention. But I think it's important to recognize that a lot of us have been screaming about this from day one and got an overwhelming amount of pushback from a lot of partisanship. And that is that no matter where he is on that roof, and I wish we could, this is the thing I actually don't like about Spaces, that I can tag things in there, but I'd like to be able to bring this up so I can show you guys. But the roof that we've seen from every angle is a pretty long roof. Right? It's actually pretty long. And the placement of where he is on that has been inconsistent from the beginning. And you could kind of brush that off as the fog of breaking news. They love to put it. I think that's usually an excuse. But nonetheless, things do happen that we're still kind of sussing out the information. But what I highlight is that you have multiple angles of video of people that were on so if you're facing the Trump stage from where that roof is, the right side of that building. Okay, so on that right side of the building is the opposite side of where the parking lot was. You can see all the grass. You can see the same window in the shot from where people are filming. They have video and still shot images of that guy laying upward on the slant facing Trump. Now, I'm all for the idea of perspective and the idea that you might be higher up on the roof, but if you truly stand back and look at how long that roof is, and then look at where they have him placed in most of these new shots all the way to the left, where the ladder was, or the one where it shows where he supposedly ended up very anomalously with his gun way too far away from him. I think the body was moved, quite frankly. My point is that none of those would have been possible to have seen him the way that you can see where he's angled, the one we've all seen, where you see the guy laid up there on top of the roof with the light behind him, aiming towards Trump. I don't see how that's even physically possible with how far they say he was, no matter how elevated you were on that side, because you would have seen more of the roof if he was high enough to see him all the way that far down. So that being said, my instinct is that, okay, he was on the far right side of that roof if you're facing Donald Trump. Okay. So then that for sure, and the argument's going to be no matter where he was, but for sure, all the way to the right would not have had a line on the, and this to be clear about this as well, the upper back part of his ear, which is even what Trump has pointed to. You can see the bandage now. You can see that there's no bloody or hurt spot on the front part of his right ear. So it's the back upper right part of his ear.
Right.
So if he were to have turned to the Jumbotron, which again, I will, John Colin has done a good job, kind of breaking this down time-wise, showing you the lines. He was pointing at it, and even Trump has said the same at the Jumbotron. So that shot wouldn't have happened. So that right there, you could say, okay, was it a lie that he was hit there? Was it something else? Possibly. Was it there was another shooter and it was on the water tower, which would line up? That's certainly possible. Like, these are all what we need to continue to ask. But I think it's an evident reality that there's no way he could have hit that spot with that time, with him looking that direction from that roof. I think that's pretty damn clear.
I want to just add a couple of things to what you just said. Ryan was just talking about the most, the spot where we've all seen crooks on the roof is on the right side if you're looking at Donald Trump. That could also be called the grassy side. That's where the grass went up to the building, where people were taking photos and videos from, seeing him lie and starting to scream, there's someone on the roof, there's someone on the roof. The other side is the left side if we're looking at Donald Trump, and that side would be the parking lot side. There was a parking lot near that. Now, obviously, Spaces is not the best place for this, so I really encourage people, go to Ryan's platform, The Last American Vagabond, and you want to watch these. If you go to my Substack, the Teachers for Choice Substack, we have the links there in our post where we have a picture of Ryan and Trump on one of our posts on the main page, because you really want to look, see for yourself. I can say what Ryan said is true because I've watched this. I spent a couple of hours watching this and thinking about it and seeing what other people are posting. Really, really critical. Crooks could not have fired a shot to the back right ear of Trump with either of these angles. And it's very bizarre that it does appear his body was dragged to get further towards the parking lot side to make it appear that he could have possibly gotten the shot. But even from that angle, as Ryan points out, he still couldn't make the shot. Suspicion and cover-up marks all over the place here. Ryan, I want to go into another, I want to stay on this and go into another piece of evidence with this. And that is that we have not seen anything. We have not seen the bullet, alleged bullet, hit Trump's ear. We have not seen footage of this. All that we have is a photo from a New York Times and Associated Press photographer who's worked for those organizations for over 2 decades that appears to have caught the bullet in mid-flight with a line that appears to be the bullet. And everybody says, well, there you go. There's the evidence. That's proof. It's really interesting that that photographer is the same photographer who took the picture of George W. Bush during 9/11 reading about goats to elementary students and not moving while the country was under attack. So there can be a question mark there about that. But you, Ryan, have also analyzed video that has gone up of people showing Trump, because there's thousands of cameras, there's thousands of phones in that audience and people recording what happened. And I remember on one of your live streams being very frustrated that it was somebody had actually edited the footage right at the moment where you would have seen Donald Trump's right ear and the bullet or what have you fly by the ear, hit the ear. It was actually edited and taken out. Have you found, and then of course, just shortly after that, there was the famous fake now, right? Somebody inverted video of Donald Trump, made his left ear his right ear, doctored it to make it look like a hole went through his ear. No blood comes out of that hole. Millions of people see that. It goes viral. It goes all over the place. And it's an obvious fake. And then again, just begs the question, why is this obvious fake being made when clearly we should be able to get footage somewhere that shows that critical historical moment of what happened to Trump's ear. Correct me if I got anything wrong on that, and tell me where you stand in terms of the investigation on that point now.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important. I think that, well, first, the fake image that was shared, like, let's just recognize, and this is what I'm always harping on, but I think it's very important. A lot of people who have very big followings blindly shared that without, and which, by the way, has to be pretty damn embarrassing because of how stupidly obvious that is. It's obviously reversed. You can see that the writing on his hat is backwards. Like, this means, like, I mean, it's not even just no due diligence. This is blind, willful ignorance, right? And we have to realize that, or they just don't even care. And I'm not going to name names, but a lot of people that you probably watch and listen to were happily sharing that because it leaned into what they wanted to be the reality, which is pretty uncomfortable. It's unnerving. But so it was ridiculous and fake. And so the first question is why? Now, certainly people do that because they want clicks and shares, but nobody really took credit for it. So ask yourself why exactly that needed to be put into the conversation. Now, maybe to muddy the waters from a different perspective, I don't know. But I do know that that is usually an indication that it's not there, right? So the idea is that you can see that shot. And I think that the bullet, first of all, the angle of the photograph itself, I quite frankly early on was like, I don't even think that's real. My gut instinct, but it seems to have been backed up by New York Times and the FBI guy, which doesn't mean that it's real. But let's realize that the shutter speed they were using is like, I've spoken to multiple people that are in this field. That it's absurd. Like, it's more than you would need to catch, as I understand it, like the hummingbird wings. There's no reason anybody would do that for what they thought they were filming right there, right? So it's a little bit suspicious in that, right? But the bigger point for me is that, why don't we talk about the angles? You can see the bullet. You can see the angle of the bullet. I mean, there are experts out there that have already made this point. The bullet is clearly not coming from an elevated position, which is where that would have been. So, so I argue that either means that neither the water tower or that place was where the bullet came from. If there was a bullet, or that image is completely fake.
Wait, Ryan, I want to pause on that 1 second. So you're saying you've spoken to people who have, and I, you know what, now that you mentioned, and I heard you reference this quickly in one of your lives on this, but you're saying the bullet that the New York Times photographer caught, he was on tons of shows about this bullet, making this line. You've had experts that say that physically that doesn't line up with what should have happened. Is that true?
No. There's 2 points there. One was the people I spoke to in regard to photography, who are simply saying that there's just nobody would have used that shutter speed for being there to film Donald Trump on a stage.
Oh.
And no matter how many shots you wanted to get, it seems it's certainly possible. Anything's possible, but it seems wildly unlikely. The other point was, if this is not speaking to somebody, this is my personal opinion, is that you look at the bullet. If you look at the angle of the shot, the bullet is not coming from an elevated position. Certainly not from the water tower, but let alone something that was higher. So that, and it also, from my and again, this could all be chalked up to perspective, but in regard to like actual perspective on like the angle of the shot of the camera, but it also looks to be quite low in regard to where it hit his ear. So none of these things are, there's a lot of these anomalies. And if you add up the other stuff, it does clearly suggest that we're being lied to in a larger way. But like, there's a lot of points around this in regard to, like, for example, the ear point in the fake image, so there are images that have gone around now that show when he pulls his hand down from his ear that he has blood on his hand. And my point is that I've seen pretty close shots of his hand during the live shot, when the video, where you can, pretty high definition, where you can pull it and slow it down, where I don't really see that. Now, maybe that's because it's too hard to see in a video and somebody grabbed it closer, but I'm very concerned about a lot of fakes going around that lean into the larger narrative that seems to have been already challenged pretty strongly by multiple shooters, by the idea that this is not, my point is, a lot of Republicans who are clearly in the interest that this was just an assassination on Trump, put it to bed, we'll move forward because that benefits the agenda of the right. That I think that we should be very on guard for more that tries to put this to bed. Because there are a lot of Republicans that are asking questions that other Republicans don't like, But so I think those right there show you that there's a little bit of some aspects of this just don't line up.
I want to add into that. I really hope all of us could remove politics from this as much as possible. I saw someone post a theory that said they believe what happened is there was an assassination attempt planned by the deep state against Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's team found out about it. And when they found out about it, they had a counter plan. Now, that's a wild theory, but I have to say, we are at a place right now, we must entertain that till we can falsify it. So we can say, no, it is wrong. I want to put out there is a space where there's a possibility where we have a real shooting, we have real people dying, we have people who plan this who don't care if Donald Trump lives or dies. And I actually agree with you, Ryan. I think there's real shots. It looks like there's real death. I've looked at a lot of this. The whole staged, quote unquote, to the point where we're dealing with actors and stuff, to me, I think has been falsified. I don't think that's what we're dealing with. Although, as you say, Ryan, we live in a wild world where a lot of wild things have happened. But I do think we can say that is far, far away from what is likely at this point. But there is a world and a possibility where these things happened and a bullet didn't hit Trump's ear and something else was happening there. For example, I don't know where the latest is on this. There were early reports that a piece of glass had hit Donald Trump's ear. And there was one photo you had shown that showed the teleprompter by Trump that was actually damaged. It appeared that it had damaged and was likely damaged from a bullet. So that is also another possibility in here as well, too. Just because myself and Ryan are questioning all of these things doesn't mean we're saying Trump planned this whole thing. He staged this. He's the guilty guy. That's not what we're doing. We're just being honest and saying we don't know, and we're not willing to settle until we have the best possible evidence, which we might not have, but you might have. At times, things pop up and things show up that are critical. I'm glad to see a lot of people on here. Please continue to share this spaces out. And after we're done, share it as well, too, because I think this is a critical conversation. Left, right, Republican, Democrat, independent, whatever you are, this is one of the most important acts of violence on American soil in decades. We can't just say, oh, well, we were lied to, move on. I think we need more attention to this. Ryan, I'm not even sure what my question is. I just kind of rambled a little bit there, but your response,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a point on that. So I agree with you. I think it's important what you said, and you're reiterating, the larger point that it's important to, in times like this, to say every 15 seconds of a conversation, because so many people are quick to fall into the partisan ideas, is that, it's what you said there. It's crazy that a lot of people push back on this, that, that's somehow irresponsible, or that we need to start taking sides. And the point is that what you said is just being objective. Obviously, we should be making sure we can prove everything that we're putting out there, but that's just not the way of the world today, and it maybe never was. But I think what you're saying, like, if we have yet to see video of the ear being shot, or the bullet itself, or it's like, why wouldn't we still leave open the possibility that maybe it didn't happen? It's weird how the very people that moments ago were the ones calling certain things conspiracy theory, or the ones fighting against that, are now doing the exact opposite when it suits their interest. You got Democrats suddenly going, it was all staged, even though 30 seconds ago they would have said it was irresponsible to ever say that. This is what we get drowned in. So if we haven't seen the bullet, and we haven't seen, even in my opinion, the actual post the day image of his ear, and I'm not saying that necessarily convinces me, because again, I'm on the side that the evidence suggests a shooting and that this is probably an assassination attempt. But just being objective, wouldn't we then go, well, it certainly could have been something else? Well, yeah, that's just objective. That shouldn't even be contentious. But weirdly enough, that's where we are today. And so your point about the glass, I have yet to verify whether the teleprompters were actually damaged. I've seen a couple different images that make it look that way, but it could easily be kind of a reflection aspect. What I think is most compelling is that we have local media that reported that the moment that the day that happened.
That's right.
That's where that came from. A local reporting said that there was a teleprompter that got hit, but a shooting though. So it was still saying a shooting, but it was the teleprompter, which the glass hit his ear. Which, by the way, wouldn't that be that shocking? And so you could argue that they removed that because they wanted this to be more compelling. I mean, who knows? But the glass part of it is really interesting, because I think that there is some overlap to the injury, that just, again, it doesn't seem to really add up for me with what you would think any bullet would do to cartilage in the ear. And I've said this from the very beginning, as much as there's still pushback, even Trump in his recent speech made the same point. Blood injuries bleed a lot. I've seen them myself. Now, there's examples of things that, examples in the past that don't show that as much, or situations where that might not be the case. I said maybe somebody could be on medications that would stop that, but I've witnessed more than one myself in sports I've played. And in general, I understand that the ear in most of its locations are vascular, and you will get a lot of blood that come out of it. And so it's interesting to me is that I didn't see that. And so my immediate thought was that, well, it doesn't really add up with the idea of a bullet. And so I thought, well, the glass might make a little more sense if it just kind of scraped his ear. And, but again, there was such a quick kind of circling of the wagons on all sides to try to nail this down the way they wanted it to. And, that's why this space like this is important.
Yeah. And then
Well, thank you. If I may add something here, interject, just because one of the reasons we were excited to be sharing this time with you, Ryan, is specifically something that you mentioned in one of your previous videos, is the importance of this time, and not glossing over the details, not being 40 years from now we're still having the same questions we have on this space, well, which is in actuality a potentiality, right? We could be 40 years from now still debating some of the very things that we're asking questions about. But something that you said is like, it's important right now, where while there's still nooks and crannies, while there's people out there who know bits of information, we coalesce and we share what we know. And the three of us, we represent communities that may maybe be more on the left, independent, more on the right. And there has been so much vitriol, so much emotionality, so much of a sort of flip of all of a sudden the people that were used to being the conspiracy theorists are the ones that are calling for cancel culture and vice versa. And I'm witnessing this flip and feeling like yet again we've gone upside down, and we need to root things in logic and calmness so that we can speak
Mm.
about this. It's okay. Like, I'm wondering, like, why do we have to get so upset about asking a question? Like, we've become so sensitive, and cancel culture comes along with it.
100%. And my opinion, I would answer that the reason people get so emotionally reactive to a question is because you're inching in on what they've already decided, usually without enough evidence, is the fact, are the facts. And that's what we see with the partisanship. You got these high level entities on either side of the partisan game who just jump in and cement the narrative. I mean, they've all done it already multiple times that have already proven to be false, but people just keep going along with it because that's their chosen side. And, that's what we're here for, is to try to show people that, we don't have to all be as clownish and cartoonish as the most of the partisanship is, but it's not as exciting. It's not as, a lot of people are leaning into this because it's the most exciting reality TV show of my life. That's what politics are today. It's reality TV show 2024 that is the most exciting, and people are more interested in the game of it all. But I'd like to believe that's not the majority, right? But I agree. I think this is important for that reason. And I will say, by the way, I don't know, I'm not the one that's hosting this, so it's up to you guys to let who in, but I'll give my thoughts on it. But I'd love for people to chime in. So if there's anybody in here listening and you got thoughts, raise your hand and I'll let them, point it out. So I like people's perspectives on this too.
Yeah, no, Ryan. Yeah, Rosangela and I agree on that for sure. I just wanna ask you one or two more things, and then we want to invite some people to come in and take the stage with you here and ask you some questions and go back and forth, because I think that's really important. The last major point for me personally, was the maybe 9, 10, 11 seconds of raised fists in the air from Trump that something felt so strange to me in that moment, because when you're dealing with presidential candidates, former presidents, Secret Service, this isn't a high level skill to understand. When anything happens, that president, former president, they're not a president or former president anymore. They're basically a sack of potatoes. And the Secret Service grabs them, pushes them around, talks to them in a way that tells them, you're out of here, you're gone. And that moment felt so theatrical to me. Time almost slowed down watching that to me, where I just started to feel and wonder what exactly is going on here. Not far after that, I saw footage in 2016, which is up, and I have it bookmarked somewhere, that showed Trump getting whisked off a stage by Secret Service. And that's how it happened. 4 seconds in, he was gone. He had no say in it. The agents just pushed him to the side. So I've actually talked to a lot of people about this. I've asked people their opinions on this. I also found it odd that Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, a number of people have come out and definitively said, you can't fake that. What Trump did there was bravery. It was pure. It was real. You can't fake that. And that blew me away, because the first thing I thought was, is this fake? Of course you can fake that. Of course you could throw a fist in the air and say, fight, fight. No, I'm not saying it was fake. I don't know for sure. But the the fact that it caught my attention, and then I saw a number of high-level influencers, conservative influencers in terms of Tucker Carlson, recent Donald Trump endorser. Elon Musk endorsed him the moment it happened. That tweet where Musk endorses Trump right after the assassination attempt happens has over 217 million views. It's one of the highest viewed posts on X ever. It's up there amongst a couple of others. So those were my thoughts around this. It still sticks out like a sore thumb to me. And I know you've referenced this before. I was wondering today, 10 days out from the event, July 23rd, what do you think about this?
It's obvious, and I'm glad we're still willing to ask the question. That there's a lot that just doesn't add up in regard to that, and it could mean that this was something that was staged, and certainly a possibility. But let's just to take it as what we can prove in the most obvious. It's unquestionable that the way the Secret Service acted on pretty much the entire time, the entire day, does not seem to be what any of us understand to be how they're supposed to act. Now, there could be something that makes sense of it, but I think the most obvious with the way that she responded in the hearings without answering questions is that they're either desperately trying to cover their asses because they were just that incompetent, or there's an obvious cover-up. And that then could mean that this was an attack on Trump's life, or that could be that there's some other aspect to it that he's involved with, or his people around him. And we could also consider that there's some foreign entity in an interest of trying to, let's be clear about this. Whatever actually happened, this has surged Donald Trump's support to levels we hadn't seen before. Like people like Zuckerberg came out and endorsed Donald Trump. I mean, this I'm almost waiting for the entire paradigm to go, well, we need Trump for X, Y, and Z, which would just make my entire point. But it's shocking to see that. And so it's clearly benefiting him. And the usual question is who benefits, right? But it's not all. People can benefit from things that they weren't involved in. But I think that the obvious reality of it is that if you're looking at the fist pump and the timing of it, you could argue the Secret Service just were swayed by Trump. And it's certainly possible that Trump just is forceful enough to get them to, assuming that maybe they are the narrative about how they were like the B team, that like Jill Biden took the, A team and he got, they've denied that now, but it certainly could be that they just weren't the best people. It still doesn't really feel like it's right, but it could be that they were just kind of bowing to what Trump wanted. But I don't think that. It seems to me that they were either shockingly incompetent or they allowed a presidential candidate to be in line of sight in open to the crowd, the largest element that you can see of people that are out there, right? The whole crowd in front of him for way too long. I mean, as you pointed out, this 2016 video, there's just the mention of a gun and they rush him off the stage faster than you've ever seen. And even then you see the way that they're waiting with him. They're not covering him properly. His head's sticking out. I mean, just nothing about it makes any sense unless you think that there's an attempt on his life or there's some kind of other action going on there, or the idea of the building they were in, the secure perimeter, the fact that they identified the location as a threat but didn't really do much about it. They say Overwatch now, but it seems nothing happened, or the idea that they identified him himself, or all these different aspects of it. There's just, in my opinion, there's no way that's incompetence. I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah.
So that's then deciding on whether it's an assassination attempt or this was all kind of manufactured, But I definitely think that the stage aspect of it shouldn't be disregarded, and like to answer your point about Tucker and them, there's multiple ways to look at it. Is that this is either an example of somebody who is like Tucker, for a specific example, him saying that there's no way you could fake that, which is obviously that's not true. Obviously somebody could fake that, is either the indication that they're just like, corralling people in the direction of what's best for the party. And you could either think that means because he doesn't care about it's just about his agenda, or because he genuinely thinks that's best for the country. I don't know the logic, but it's a little bit, this is the kind of dishonesty we see from the partisanship constantly, just kind of corralling people in the direction of what works for that agenda. And I don't think it's a question that this was, obviously they could have faked this and he could have done that for his best interest. And I just think it stands out as a sore thumb in the whole thing when you add up all the other pieces to it, the angles of the shots. I can go on forever in regard to that, but I agree with you. I think that the element of it does stand out. And a lot of people who I greatly respect their opinion are still of the mind that this was, if not staged, highly manipulated, and not from the sense that he was under assassination attempt, but the evidence points otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks for giving that thorough answer there. We're gonna open up to some questions. Please.
Well, before we Before we
Oh,
do
go
that,
ahead.
actually, do you mind if there's a lot of other elements I think that, and we can go on continuing. If people have questions, we can do it at the same time if you'd like. But like going through the whatever else we wanted to get into.
Oh yeah.
I think
So yeah, let's do that. So let's hold off on questions. We're gonna let Ryan go over some of the more important details of what his investigation has uncovered. Oh, here's my last question, really, and then you take us anywhere you want. You talked about you might stop investigating into this because what if this is a distraction from other important news throughout the world? We know we have no lapse in news. Are you stopping your investigation? Will you continue? I hope you're going to continue.
Well, yeah, I don't think I ever said I would stop this. I think that I'll always consider whether this might be a distraction. If I said that, I don't know the context of it, but I think I won't. I mean, my point would be that I never stop investigating anything. I simply will, if like right now, the last so many days, in fact, I've just been pulled away from all this other stuff that I've been, lawfare and attacks on my platform and so on. That's been pulling me away from stuff. But nonetheless, though, and that's for a different conversation. Like, make sure we focus on this. But what's interesting though is that I definitely have already got this feeling where I tend to get in these kind of discussion points where it starts to, you can just feel the conversation, getting out of control. Like in not just in, theorizing about different possibilities, but like I said, assumption stacked on assumption stacked on assumption. It starts getting haywire and it becomes very difficult to get any kind of logical assessment through the partisan screaming, and it's that, so it tends to push me away from it a bit, but I don't,
Okay.
I will never stop covering this. If something breaks down that I think is provable, I'm always going to cover. I still bring up things that go back discussions from a decade ago. If it comes up and it's important, relevant, and you can actually prove something, But I will. I'm going to keep talking about this.
Well,
And
I hope beyond talking about this, you actually actively investigate because it's been hard for me to stop watching what you're doing, and I just honestly I can't say that about anything else that was out there about J13. I guess is what people refer to this now as. I want to make one last point, and then I really will let you go on and with you just laying out what's important. If there was a quote unquote staged element to this, I don't like that word. I think there was real shots, there was real people killed. So that's not staged in my opinion at this point. But if there was some attempt at that, I don't see Donald Trump doing it. What I see is an intelligence apparatus who really runs stuff coming in and telling Trump, this is happening. Not like you are doing this. I don't really think Trump is running the world, nor Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, that's not really what's happening. We've seen time and time again intelligence agencies that have agendas and that plot things out and try to manipulate world events and manipulate perception. And when they could do both at the same time, that is a huge intelligence win. Because what happens? You have people clawing at each other's throats, digging into their red team, blue team, whatever team, and not coming together and not fighting who the real enemy is. I obviously am speculating there. I can't prove what I just said. Sometimes we need to speculate, but we also need to recognize what is proven and what isn't. I know that's not proven. I just think that's important to consider in this as well.
And Ryan, before you respond, I'm so sorry. I just want to put this nugget because I keep thinking about the tech glitches, and I know you mentioned that happens a lot, and I'm sure that you're also familiar, and I'm just wondering if you see any connection to any of them. If the glitches, if you see there's any connection to J13, as we're calling it
the
now.
CrowdStrike discussion. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, we can get into that for sure. Well, so I first to the intelligence aspect of it, I mean, obviously that's certainly something to consider. I mean, but any number of the things that we've already outlined as possible would all line up with that, right? Any number of those things, whether it's an assassination attempt, intelligence has been absolutely behind, whether it's domestic or foreign aspects of that in the past, 100%, or whether it's using this because Donald Trump is, in my opinion, and this has been my opinion before this, that he is the selection for the next rulership of this country. And I think that's the case. That's why it's been very hard for me to kind of put that aside. And I have, I'm trying to be objective about it because I think it's easy for me to lean into that mindset and then see how this all benefits him. And it's hard for me to miss the other, my point is that I do still think the evidence points on a genuine assassination attempt. My gut tells me that there's something very off about this, so it could, like I was saying, it could be that the intelligence is manufacturing something that definitely benefits Donald Trump. And you could even argue that he didn't even know that was going to happen. I mean, that's this point about there's so much assumption and so much possibility, so it's important that we stick with what we can prove. And I think that at the end of the day, this gets into the bigger point, and I'll come back to the uh, technological stuff, that going into the stuff like we just saw with the hearing and the Secret Service aspects of it, the locations on the roof, the angles, the different people that died. I mean, like you said, I don't know. It's always possible that this is some kind of manufactured thing that's all completely fake and it's not even what happened, the actors and so on. I very much don't think that's the reality, but certainly a possibility. We have people that have died. We have family members speaking, but you can make that argument about any number of events that you could question as being fake. But so leaning into the idea that this is an actual shooting, right? We have to then ask the questions about the multiple shooter angles. And if you have multiple shooters and you still don't end up hitting Trump, how do we make sense of that? Right? I mean, is it just that they both missed? Is there multiple shots? I mean, and the inconsistencies with the timing of the shots. I think this highlights that there was something more than just a genuine assassination attempt. And I know that's not the easiest thing to get into because people want this to be settled. They want this to, mean what they want it to mean. But there's the aspects of the roof, again, with the people that were inside the roof. You have video now showing them looking at the roof itself that you would have seen, which is supposed to be where they were inside that building. So I think it's very obvious that there's a cover-up taking place in regard to the Secret Service. So I want to make sure that's clear in regard to the focal point of today. The question is whether what they're covering up, right? Are they hiding the fact that this was an assassination attempt, that they failed? And in that case, then how do you explain all the other aspects of it? How do you explain the Secret Service locations and the fact that they responded in weird times? It's all inconsistent. But or it could be that they're covering up some kind of an organized effort. And I know, let me put it this way. I think that the evidence points in the direction of an assassination attempt, but I think something about this continues to drive me in the direction that this was done for Trump's benefit. And I know that's contentious. That's my personal opinion. I think that it's hard not to see how this ends up, where we continue to see the waterfall of support. My thoughts from before this being that I think Trump was the go-to in the first place, and even the fallout afterward in regard to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And everything seems to align to drive him into power right now. And so then you go back to the actual ear discussion itself and the anomalies around the injury that don't make sense, the timing of it. All these things continue. Again, standing back in an overview, it all seems to line up in the direction of assassination. But when you dig into these individual points, there's so much inconsistency. And why would the Cheadle be so resistant to giving literally any information? And then you weirdly get this unification of Congress. All of them are saying resign and this shouldn't have happened and political violence. Weirdly, all of them blaming on Iran, in which it doesn't make any sense. And so again, it's not a conclusion. But I think that we need to be careful about falling into the idea that this is exactly what it looks like, because there's a lot of reason to think that we're being lied to. I would love to hold out for actual video of the ear being hit, which I can't believe that hasn't come out yet. I mean, I've shown two examples now. One where a guy did turn away, but the other one where you have a mainstream-esque kind of platform that just cut away. They have a live shot and they have multiple cameras. So that means somewhere they have video of this. How in the world would that not be in front of us by now? That doesn't seem right at all, does it? And so there's that aspect of the fakes that have already come out, the lies, the people that at high levels that have already continued to pump out false narratives. I don't know. I just think there's something very wrong about this. And then the idea of the CrowdStrike technological aspect of it, we'll see how this plays out in regard to what that might be. Maybe it's not connected in any way to this. But one of the things I've seen floated, which would make sense to me, is the idea that, what if they come out and say, well, we lost all the information. We had all these recordings and all these things. In fact, I'll take that back because I know Cheadle just came out and said apparently they don't have any of the recordings, which he said that in the hearing. It's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And certainly could mean assassination, but I just want people to be skeptical about that as well. Because let's put it this way, it could very well have been a bullet or something else that was designed to drive this into support of Trump. And I know that seems less likely than a direct assassination, especially within the partisan mindset that it's the Democrats against everybody. But it makes more sense to me when you really stand back and look at it all. I think that's important.
Yeah, I tend to lean that direction. I have people who have said that, well, Trump was up in the polls. Why would this be done? I personally think that Trump has a Bobby Kennedy problem, but that clearly leans into my bias. I've endorsed Bobby Kennedy.
I will add one thing too, of course, and I'm sure this is not popular with most people in this discussion, but that's all assuming that your vote even translates to the outcome, right? So we love to lean into the idea that it's like, oh, the polls and they're vying for the presidency and they're debating, they're fighting each other. But, what if, just for sake of conversation, your vote doesn't actually translate to the outcome? What then does that change for your mindset listening? right? If that means that the point was that there's powerful entities that are putting people in power and convincing you that you're the one making decisions, what do they need to accomplish? Perception.
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
been done.
Well, no, absolutely. There's no question that perception management is a huge, huge issue here. No matter what theory you have about what happened, perception management since that event is just ginormous and gigantic. I do want to, this is a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Ryan, for this. I want to open it up to some people speaking. Cozy, can you unmute yourself? I gave you.
You got to bring him
I
up as
did,
a
yeah.
speaker. While he comes up
He's
as
there,
a
he's there.
speaker, because it's not registered.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Go ahead,
Ryan,
No, he's good.
something-
He's good. So yeah, so when we do questions, let's please try to keep it concise. We have numerous people that are waiting here. Try to keep it to a minute or two, and Ryan will respond. Cozy, go for it.
And not Ryan concise, real concise.
Yeah, I want to say thank you so much, Ryan,
ahead.
for this conversation. Ryan, Michael, Rose Angel, thank you for having this because it's been very difficult. And like you guys said, just to kind of ask questions, people come at you for even questioning things, right? So like, just like the other side was doing the same we're seeing with our own people. So thank you for hosting this, and very intelligent questions have been asked. And these are great questions, and I've had some of these questions myself. And my thing is, I wanted to point out was what's very suspicious to me is that at Secret Service, what Secret Service would ever allow the president to take that photo? You know what I mean? Like they would never allow him to. They would put him down and make sure that he's safe, right? So that's kind of suspect. And the ear thing, yeah, man. Like it to me, it doesn't seem like a bullet hit. It could have been a ricochet, could have been glass, could have been, I don't know. You know what I mean? But it doesn't look like it was a gunshot, and it might have been. I don't know, but in my gut, something is definitely off. Obviously, I don't know. I really don't know what to say, but I have a lot of questions, and it's good that we keep questioning things. I don't want to jump to conclusions. I'm not saying that this was a fake assassination attempt because it seems like it was. It seems like it was real, but definitely multiple shooters. I can say, like that to me, that's a definite. I know there was multiple shooters, just by the sounds of the guns and like the things that I'm hearing with replays, and it just makes sense, right?
Cozy, let's turn it over to Ryan to respond.
Absolutely, yeah. I want to hear his take on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Chris Martinson and others have, and I respect he's very intelligent, have argued, based on mathematics, based on audio, and I've covered most of this on the show already, that their opinion is it's 100% proven there's a second shooter, which in my opinion lines up with exactly what we've been finding, And so again, going back to the original point we discussed, if you look at the angle and you also agree that it is impossible, if not wildly unlikely, for a bullet to hit the top, back, upper right part of his ear while he's looking at the Jumbotron, well, that then, confirms the idea that there must have been something else or it wasn't even shot, right? So it's so important to keep all these things in mind at the same time. And I agree with you. I think the Secret Service aspect of this is just unreal. I just, there's no comparative point. Everywhere else you look in any other circumstance, it seems very clear that they reacted very differently. And, again, that's what we can prove. Whether you can, then from there, you can make conclusions or assumptions, but I think it's important to establish that. Or, how about the idea about the shoot first discussion, which I'm still completely blown away by. This idea that we're supposed to now argue that they're not allowed to shoot first, even if they see a guy with a gun, because they're supposed to be, that's what they've said.
That's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. I don't even think that should be entertained. It's just moronic. I'm sorry.
I just want to say,
there's nuance, because the first point is they're saying, well, if we see, like they say, we got the guy with the rangefinder, or maybe you got a telescope. And I'm like, my point would be, I understand the logic of not jumping the gun and shooting at somebody in a large crowd. But my point would be that whether or not you agree with it, I think we can prove that the opposite has always been true. That the reality of Secret Service is they are supposed to be trigger, like that they respond without in the interest of the president's protection, and err on that side, right? And so this idea that they saw him the 7 minutes before, you can see them. So if Trump is facing forward, the snipers to his right, you can see them with their binoculars looking at the exact location this guy is in. Then with a minute before, you can see him looking, you can see him respond. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I don't believe that. I called the Nashville office, and I ended up speaking with the security, the secret agent in charge, and a special agent in charge, excuse me. And he basically said, I have it right here, the direct quote, which it makes sense, but I found it a little bit interesting. He said, quote, "We do not provide any context around protective measures." And then I asked him a little follow-up, and he said, no one is going to give you that answer that question, which makes sense if you want to think that they're trying to kind of, hide the fact that they are not allowed to fire first. But overall, it just doesn't line up with what we know. And I think Dan Bongino is somebody who, he's very partisan, but he, I guess, comes from that background. And he himself has made that point that that's just not true, flat out not true. So what are they covering up with that? That point more than many would lead me to more into the direction of a genuine assassination attempt, right? Because they would manufacture this idea that we had to respond and we're the heroes that had to act late or whatever it was. I think that was the all that you brought up. Go ahead.
Let's go to another question. I think it's Laylee, and then we'll do DVS. Laylee, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks for bringing me up. I appreciate the space. Ryan, I've been following your work for probably over a decade now, and anybody that doesn't know your work. Anyone that's looking for a thorough, unbiased analysis needs to give you a follow immediately. I mean,
thanks, man.
I follow you a lot on Rumble, send you super chats. I think sometimes it's very controversial, but with this, I appreciate your stance on this, because there's a lot of these influencers today that are taking a definitive stance, ruling out other possible scenarios. And to me, that's just like lazy journalism, if you want to consider yourself a journalist, at the minimum, if not disingenuous outright. For me, this is just my opinion and like my gut feeling, and I think you kind of touched on this point earlier, but like, who benefits the most? If this was a staged assassination, there's two major beneficiaries to this. One being Donald Trump, and two being his handlers. For the first time in history, we had American populace that was questioning the two-party illusion, and that hit a brick wall now. People are like, there's no way the deep state is controlling everything, because they try to take out Trump now. Exactly. So now all of a sudden, we just hit a brick wall, and now people think that, the government is for the people, where when they were on the fence and just questioning it. That's one. Two, if this was a real assassination, and knowing how Trump's persona is, he would have taken a picture of it when he got home and wore it like a badge of honor. He would have shown his ear to everyone. I mean, I know it sounds funny, but where's the picture of his ear? I mean, we saw it live.
Well, I want to, I'd like to respond to that. Possibly he could have done that, but that is major speculation to me. That's as much speculation as people who say to me, well, but I want to say that's as much speculation as people who say to me, of course he pumps his fist while there's active gunmen to shoot him. That's how he is. So, I understand what you're saying, but I do think it goes deep speculation.
I just want to bring up some red flags for me, for my gut feeling, like,
go ahead.
He would wear that thing like a badge of honor. He would show it off. I mean, his ear was intact. It wouldn't have been that gruesome, or that, that people couldn't see the scratch on his ear, or whatever you want to call it. That's one. And then two, the crowd behind him was all recording the event. Where's a video of the crowd, other than they're hiding something? So we can't rule out the possibility that this was staged. And I think 100% it was, but that's just my opinion. Ryan, again, I appreciate your work, brother. I'll always support you. I'm subscribed to your locals, and
Thanks,
I'm the one that sent you a super chat one time. You said you wish you could have refunded me, but that's another topic. Talk about that another day.
That's funny. I'm sure. I think I remember that, actually. But no, appreciate your support, man. Thank you. Well, so and I appreciate what you said, teachers. But I think it's we're going to be speculating, right? And the only thing that's important is that we're clear when we're speculating, right? And I think so I agree with you. I think that's important. But so what's interesting is about the two-party illusion point. I think that's an important aspect of this, is that we had a lot of people seeing through a lot of different things. From the COVID-19 illusion, I think it was very clear that was a non-part. I mean, there was slants, as there always are, but it was nonpartisan. People were seeing this from all sides, and they really wanted this to be a partisan issue. Same thing that's happening with Israel and Gaza. They're desperate to drive this into partisan conversation when it's really not. People around the world from all walks of politics, all religions and ethnicities are calling out this genocide. And I think it's important to see that is a scary thing for the power structure that's desperately needing a division tactic to keep us in line and stop paying attention to who our real problem is. are. Problem is. And so I think that's important to think about. So back to the point is that we're at this time where people are questioning things they never really have before. And if you really needed an event that would, one, shockingly distract, look at what we're talking about today. While there's other things going on, right? Everybody's conversation, pull the air out of the room, and then drive people who might have been on the fence to support Donald Trump, even people that were not, like a Zuckerberg, for example, to support Donald Trump. Then, I mean, look no further. This worked to a T, if that's what happened, right? But I think that's a very important thing to consider, right? Because this gets into the conversation of not, and it could be not staged at all. This could be very much well, it depends on what you mean by staged, right? Whether it's fake or that it's just a manufactured event for that interest, which could mean real bullets and real, whatever you want to talk about, with Trump not even be aware it's happening. Those are all just simply possibilities. And I think that is an interesting thing to consider with the outcome and the who benefits side of it, right? But as always, we need more than that. We need evidence to back up these claims. And so if that's where it stays, we leave it there until we get more to go on. But that is an interesting thought. And it would almost be irresponsible for me to not think about and consider and bring up the very clear event happening in the world right now that I find is possible to be connected to just about anything going on right now, which would be what Israel's going through, right? So it's interesting to think about this overlap. And then I want to get into Thiel and Vance and that side of it, which, the idea to your point is that if he's attacked by the deep state, therefore he is our hero, or at least not the bad guy. It's a very dangerous and easily used manipulation. Because we see that
that's an interesting point. What is it, a day or two after we have the J13 attempted assassination, Vance is announced as the vice president, who is connected to Peter Thiel, who is very, very interwoven into the CIA. Actually, the CIA is Palantir's, his company Palantir's, their number one client. So it almost kind of softens that blow of having this guy appointed, which is definitely very, very interesting. I want to before we get to
let me flush that thought out really quickly. So the point was that clearly we have somebody who is you added to it well, though. The point being that simply this is a person who probably would have been at least uncomfortable to announce, a guy that's a never Trumper, pro-mask, pro-vaccine. This guy that at least at one point narratives shift very easily when you want to perceive someone differently. But the point is that would be the wrong fit, except that they wanted him until the idea now is that, well, anybody on his side is now fighting for freedom, and how dare you question that? It's like that is very easy to see, and so I think that's an important dynamic to all of this, that it was possibly done in order to justify that. My point with Israel is that you can clearly see that right now that the Israeli government, and we're going to see it, mark my words, and I will keep talking about this too, we're going to see this as this fleshes out in the next, however long it takes, months, where we're going to see Israel completely get exposed for what it's been doing and the reality of the apartheid state and the destruction of what's been built around that. And they are flailing. Their government is irrationally acting out. It's attacking literally everybody it can. And so would that be put out of the realm of possibility that this would have been done for that exact purpose? I just want to highlight that. Look at how much this has distracted the conversation. Now, again, the evidence points in a different direction, but I think that's important to consider. And then I was going to get into Vance and Thiel and talk about that a bit, but if you wanted to go ahead, teachers, we'll come back to that.
Ryan, if people really want to ask questions, so let's do questions and let's go into Vance and Thiel, because that is so critical. I'm so glad Whitney Webb's done her great research. You're highlighting that. People need to check that out. I want to bring up DVS. This is a brother I know from New York City who's fought for medical freedom very, very hard. He's a pretty big Trump supporter as well, too. DVS, why don't you come on, bro? How are you?
What's up, Michael? Thank you for having me on. I'm actually en route to Tampa to go make some music and music videos. But yeah, I've been listening in, and I'll just go right ahead. What I like to consider one of my favorite characteristics or personality traits is that since I was a child, I've always looked into why a person does what they do. Like, people have stolen from me, people have done me wrong, but I've always looked deeper to see why would my best friend steal from me or try to take my girl or this and that. And I always really try to consider the and why they do such things, and really sense, vibes and what kind of a person somebody is. And I think I've gotten really good at that. I think everybody also kind of, a lot of people that I'm connected with in the New York Freedom Rally and my friends throughout, Florida, and the people who have connected with me since childhood. I still have all my friends since elementary school. And one thing that I've always been able to do is I've always been able to sniff out a liar. And sometimes they don't know that I know it because I forgive them for being that liar. But I'm a really good sense of character. I have a really good sense of character. And one thing I look at. Can you hear me still?
Oh, you cut out. I think you're back.
Okay, sorry. One thing that I can go straight to with Trump is that we were talking about, this strangely looks like it makes him look better. I don't find that strange at all because Trump has been a winner his entire public life, full-blown winner his entire life. He's always been good at the stuff he tries to do, at the stuff he sets his mind to. He's always been good. And also, he's always kept the same character. When you see the uneasiness of the left, Nancy Pelosi, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer, Jerry Nadler, Kamala Harris, AOC, all of these people, they are uneasy. They act out of pure emergency or urgency. They're just completely uneasy. They're not, at peace. And what I've also noticed about the left is that they're really good at hiding. They hide. Like Barack Obama, you never see him expose himself to being questioned by some random person. Sorry, I cut out again, didn't I? Am I good now?
Yeah, you're back.
So to be caught off guard on being questioned about something that he can be exposed by, he doesn't allow that. Nancy Pelosi cuts every conversation short. Joe Biden walks right off the stage. These people don't allow themselves to be trapped because there's not honesty in their heart. They know that they can be trapped on something because they are not honest people. But Trump exposes himself to the elements, allows himself to be questioned anywhere, anytime, any day. He's available. He comes and meets the crowd. Every event, he shakes people's hands. He meets with the police. He meets with the firefighters, all of this stuff. I don't find that kind of character in all the people that I've witnessed to be absolute liars and to be uneasy and not be able to control their actual true nature, to have Freudian slips over and over again. Trump has no Freudian slips ever. He doesn't flip-flop on his ideas. He's been the same guy with the same ideas since his earliest public video you could ever find of Trump. You find the exact same character. Now, the video of the ear, I've seen one today and I've seen one for the past week. There is video of his ear being shot, and you could see the hole being being pierced and the hole being made.
DVS, I got to speak to that just a little bit because we already talked about that. The only video that we've seen is actually inverted. It was actually flipped, and you could tell because the letters on Trump's hat are backwards, and the flag is visible, which was actually on his left ear. So somebody flipped that video, and then the whole no blood comes out of the ear at all. And now it's basically recognized that this video is a fake, and we have no idea who created it. No one has claimed to be the creator of that video. So if you have a different video that I haven't seen, please send to me. I definitely want to see it. But we talked about that earlier.
I did see a second video where you actually see the chunk already off of his ear, and you see a nice little groove of his ear gone.
Please share that with me. I'll share it with Ryan. We'd love to see that for sure. DVS, can we let Ryan reply?
Just to clarify, yeah, I'll jump in here.
Sure.
To clarify, so are you saying you've seen a video where you see it shoot, then there's blood, then there's a chunk, or you see that first video that's been shown to be fake, and you have an image of the chunk out of his ear? You still there? Maybe
No,
lost
cut
him
out.
Go ahead. You cut out. Go ahead.
DVS, can you hear us?
Now just
Nah, yeah.
Well, I will talk about that in general. I mean, I was hoping for a question, so that just kind of seemed like a narrative set out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying I can hear you. You can go ahead, Ryan, for a second while I fix my audio here.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I've I have not seen another video, and if we have, we should be just as skeptical as we were from the first one that was proven to be a false. And it's important to see that not only is the writing backwards on his hat, you can prove that it's inverted because the woman who's on his left when he's facing forward is on the other side, and you can see that he's facing the wrong direction for when he has supposedly got shot.
Right.
That's obvious. So that's not even up for dispute. But if he has another video, I'm very interested to see that, right? Because I don't think any of us are ruling out that he was necessarily shot in the ear. I think it's just that there's inconsistencies, right? But what I would say to a lot that he laid out there, this doesn't need to be a partisan argument about our personal feelings about politicians, because I frankly think that is, how we lose ourselves in this. But I would argue, with all respect, that I find a lot of that to be pretty naive, that I think that Donald Trump is just like the rest of them. And we were just about to get into the Thiel overlap and all this. I think that Trump has shown himself to be incorrect or two-faced on a hell of a lot of stuff. But same people just tend to overlook the things that they, I'll say he lied about that, and they'll be like, no, here's why this makes sense. And it's like, okay, maybe there's a narrative that makes it seem like it makes sense and so on. But my point about all of that aside is we're not trying to debate the virtues of whether Trump's a good person, or the conversation of whether he's a good person, or whether he's better than the Democrats. I see them all as the same. I think what we need to do from this conversation, or anything like in this kind of conversation, is establish that we're talking about our government. We're not talking about the left or the right. We're talking about our government. And we need to hold our government accountable for the lies that our government tell us. And that's any one of them, all of them, doesn't matter. And the only way we're ever going to get past this two-party division is if we continue to, or if we begin acknowledging them as the same thing. Because quite frankly, I think we can prove that the only things, and this is my opinion, the only things they seem to be always aligned on are war and Israeli support. And we're pretty much always at war because of Israel. And I think those things are important to consider. But whether those things are what you think or not, maybe you think they're focused on other things. I think it's important to see that our government is always in line when it comes to war and it comes to certain interest about controlling our lives. And everything else is noise, in my opinion. And so this is about trying to come to the truth about what actually happened that day, no matter whose side it benefits. I think what we're highlighting right now is that it, without question, has benefited Donald Trump a lot. Now, you could, and maybe if this was completely organic, you might expect that anyway. That's not to say that it proves anything. It's just highlighting more of the facts, And I think the one other point that you added there that I forgot about, it had to do with that same idea, but I'll go ahead and leave it there.
I want to now just let Mark for NY speak, and then Christian will Ryan, excuse me, will give you some time to go into the Peter Thiel aspect of it. But Mark, can you?
Before we do that, though, hold on. Before we jump over to Mark, did D or official, or what is his name? Did he DVS? I'd like to hear if he has another video, and feel free to share it on the Spaces
awesome.
right now so we can check it out.
Yeah, I do as well too. DVS is a friend of mine. I have his phone number. I'll make sure he and I follow up, Ryan, and we'll get that over to you like 100% for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I meant right now for the Spaces. If he's got the link, share it. I'd love for us to see it, because that's fascinating. If he's got something.
Great.
Like
Yeah. DVS, if you could share that, please do. But I am going to move on to another question. I want to make sure we have time for everybody here. Mark for NY, another friend of mine, another conservative from New York who stood up during COVID, fought against the mandates, was in the street, ran for office here. Glad to have you on. Mark, can you unmute yourself and come on to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Hey, Ryan, thanks for doing this. I appreciate the input on everything. My personal take is Cheadle was appointed. So if there was something that, the Secret Service was involved to help Trump, I just think that's unlikely, because government agencies, FBI, et cetera, have all been against Trump. So the Secret Service being involved in a plot that would help Trump just seems unlikely. I think that Crooks was not the primary shooter. I think he was the scapegoat. I think there was a second shooter. It could have been someone military, someone from the Secret Service, from another location that actually took the shot. Whether it hit his ear or not is another question. He did move his head right before contact. So as soon as this happened, the concept of the ear, I understand how unlikely that seems. The only person that he said he showed it to was Gutfeld in the RNC convention. He took the bandage off to show him, and he said, somebody has to see this wound or whatever, so to verify that it's real or whatever. But I do have a question, though. I mean, first of all, CNN broadcasting this, when they never broadcast Trump rallies. I want to get people's thoughts on that. And also the RFK conversation. I mean, RFK now has Secret Service detail as a result of this, but the phone conversation that him saying on speaker with RFK, the mosquito that he thought it was a mosquito bite that hit his ear, was that, do you guys think that was planned too, or the fact that it was videotaped, or what are your thoughts on that and the CNN broadcasting it? And also your thoughts on my theory that I do think the Secret Service was involved in the attempt to assassinate Trump, and they just missed. That's my official theory. And I don't think Crooks was the shooter. I do think that there was a second person that took the shot, and he was just the scapegoat.
Okay, yeah. So first, I think what's important is, the Secret Service being involved is not necessarily conclusive, right? I mean, like it's clearly where the evidence points. I mean, it would be, again, my personal feeling is it's pretty hard to explain that level of what appears to be incompetence or not knowing what they should be doing, or whatever it is. But it could simply be that this happened without them being involved. I mean, that's also possible. So just, the right today is just about trying to, highlight what we can prove and the information around it. I think what's clear though is that there was incompetence to the level of possible, action to allow this to happen. But to your point about, the FBI and they're against him and so on. I mean, I just don't know if I believe all of that at face value. I know it's very clear. There's a lot of personal opinions about, like for instance, so I think that like Nancy Pelosi has or let's make a better example, like Maxine Waters. I think she hates Donald Trump. I think she's so overwhelmed with that she's blinded by it. And frankly, I think most people in Congress aren't really the ones making a lot of these choices. But that's not to say that there's not some larger agenda where all of them are in line, whether they even know it or not. So in the case of like the FBI and going after Trump and the investigations and the political persecutions, which I agree with, I still think you can argue that this might not be about their hatred for Trump. It could be simply about the larger agenda for the empire that has nothing to do with whether they hate or like Trump. So it's why I always caution to avoid falling into the partisan kind of conversations about this, even as valid as they may be personally. Because I think it's easy. You could argue that whether Secret Service or anybody else could have easily been involved with this for some larger agenda. Whether, you think about it like this, is you get people, whether movie stars or anybody else that get approached historically by the CIA or whatever else, they go, do it for your country, and then it turns out they were doing it for some regime change tactic that helped nobody. The point is that they use that kind of mindset for a lot of people, and people that are in government positions are usually pretty susceptible to that. So it's easy. You could argue compartmentalization. Anyway, I could go out. There's a lot of possibilities. I'm just saying to argue that it's unlikely that would have happened because they don't like him. That's the dangerous direction to go in. You could definitely be right.
Yeah, I actually just want to add to that. I agree, Mark. Your theory definitely is possible. It's definitely possible that the Secret Service was involved against Trump. I just think Ryan hits on a really important. Yes, the Secret Service, the FBI, portions of the CIA have been against Trump, but factions or what groups? This idea that these groups are monoliths, the idea that the FBI, CIA, Secret Service all go in lockstep to just one thing. There is infighting in various circles. There are different groups, and as Ryan said, there's time these different groups and different factions come together for some sort of greater plan or greater purpose. We have a few more questions, but before we go into the questions, Ryan, I wanted to, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
He had two more things he pointed out. We can skip them if you'd like, if there's a time issue.
No, go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
He brought up the CNN broadcasting point that I did think was interesting. The idea that that's actually a very good point to add to the larger perception or larger, cataloging of all these things. It could mean nothing, or, it could mean that there's a reason they wanted people seeing this on all sides. So he's right. I mean, I do notice there's a lack of coverage that tends to come from the left-leaning, media. And it is interesting that happened. It's an excellent point. It would, my opinion, add to the possibility of this being something that they wanted everyone to see how this went down, which in my mind would lean you more in the direction of benefiting Trump and the empire perception from somebody that sees this more of a left-right divide, like, fighting each other. Then that might speak to the idea that I guess the CNN might have wanted you to see Trump get killed. That wouldn't really line up for me. I would see it more of the together uniparty idea. And then RFK Jr., I do actually think that video was very staged. That doesn't have to mean anything other than that. that I just find it hard to believe that Trump would just organically call RFK out of nowhere and that he would just pick up the phone and they would happen to be filming. And it just seems, but it could just be politics, like benefiting them both. I'm actually starting to feel like you're going to see RFK pull back and line up with Trump somehow. Just a kind of a gut feeling, but we'll see how that goes forward.
Yeah.
A lot of people have that gut feeling. I just want to interject real quickly here, and Ryan, and just kind of mention that my sister and I, we went to the Bronx Trump rally, and we were positioned right at the front, like first line, but not to the stage, to this like a side profile. So we got to see when Trump pulled up, the way Secret Service would maneuver around him and the people who protect him. They had their hand on like where the gun would be, like at all times, and one foot right by the stage on the side, so like they were ready to move. And the people that were around him seemed like they would be very capable. Another thing that I wanted to point out, because I am a member of the media industry and I've been for 20 years, I'm a crossover from corporate media. So being in this rally, that I can tell you that mainstream media didn't show up until late in the game, and so that is a point to mention that I think is interesting to me, because one of my biggest question marks that I don't know if it even makes sense is how come BBC was there? Like, I've been to a lot of these. I cover boots on the ground a lot, and I a lot of conservative stuff, and I rarely ever see mainstream unless it's for the bochinche time. Down to when we were doing the Ghislaine Maxwell hearings, they would only come for the glass, for the bochinche time, for the gossip, and then they would be completely absent. So this to me was a big aha, because my big question was, what the heck was BBC there? And everybody was like, oh, because it's a Trump rally. I'm like, if we were going to have major press, why wouldn't we have had it in the Bronx, where he went to the
Good
hood
point.
and everybody expected him for crap to go down? And I was there from like 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were the last to leave. So there are details there that I have questions about. I watched the whole hearing yesterday, and it's not lost on me that all of the times that I've ever been seeing for years, I've never seen people in Congress so unified around this message of unity. And I'm in media, so I'm trained to listen to things that sound like a mantra. I can pick that up quickly. I'm surprised too that everybody was just focused on this just being a lone shooter. That to me adds a big question, no matter what my political leanings might be. So those are the things that I wanted to offer. And also, in case I forget and we run out of time, if there is an appetite for there to be a part 2 to this, I would suggest that we do it via video, so that and I would definitely welcome it if it's possible, because this has been a really informative conversation. So thank you everyone for being here.
Absolutely.
Ryan, you want to respond to that at all?
Oh, well, I mean, she added well to the, I agree. I think those are good points. The media and the anomaly that, suddenly covering it where they haven't before, or not doing so in other places, or the Secret Service. I mean, I think they're all good. These are adding to the points we were making today, that it doesn't line up with what happened that day, and so I think the larger obvious overlap to this is that and to what you brought up again, which I do think is important not to miss, the unification of Congress in front of us like that in a very weird way when it has to do with Donald Trump. So literally Hitler, now suddenly it's, it's the way, and that's the way they frame him, right? It just, it seems, we all know they lie. They say what they need to say to get you to think what they want you to think in that moment. So whatever, Hitler or white supremacy, whatever they put up then doesn't mean they mean it, but it's an odd shift to suddenly all be behind him and supporting him and, and driving support toward him. And even the lone shooter aspect, I didn't watch the whole hearing, but somebody was saying that they within that brought up the idea of a second shooter. Is that the case for anybody out there that watched the hearing?
I didn't catch that personally. Rose Angel, you said that you did watch the whole thing. Did you ever see them mention a second shooter?
I believe that one of maybe it got mentioned once or twice, but I was only referring to the overall messaging from both
Right.
sides was one shooter, one shooter, one shooter, and this 20-year-old and all of, and where was he on the roof? And in my mind, I'm like, how come nobody's pointing to other possibilities? That whole coalescing around messaging, things like when you're in media, you pick up these little
Yeah.
cues. It doesn't sit right. It's something that's out of place.
Yeah,
I agree.
it has a feeling of an orchestration, which certainly happens in Congress with regularity. Ryan, I'd thanks for entertaining all those questions. We have a few more, but I want you to get into this other piece before we'll open up questions again. This piece about JD Vance being appointed to the vice president just maybe 48 hours or not even after the J13 assassination attempt happened. Talk to us a little bit about that. What is the importance of Vance and his connections to Peter Thiel?
Yeah, well, I mean, I highly recommend you read, if you're referencing the Unlimited Hangout article. It's, I think it's JD Vance, and I think it's worse than you think, something like that. It's an excellent article Whitney put up on Unlimited Hangout. Outstanding. We recently just clipped it out for our TLAV clip segment on our TLAV Twitter account. So if you want to see that, just the clip, the link there is on the Rumble interview she had with Jimmy Dore, where they talk about it. And it really is an excellent discussion. So the gist of it, excuse me, the gist of it is that we're talking about somebody like right now going to the point we're just coming off of, that the overwhelming surge of support is that Trump's fighting the deep state, and that everybody, it's part two of the same game we saw last time, where suddenly drain the swamp became, I think even as Jimmy Dore used his joke, he said he drained the swamp and then found his cabinet at the bottom, right? That's all, nobody can look back at what happened last time and see anything different, because one by one, all the people we were told to, ignore because you need insiders to fight the inside, or whatever the Q narrative, whatever the Republicans were saying at that time, one by one, they all became his enemies, from Bolton to Pompeo to Barr, at least momentarily for some of them. And so it just very clearly showed to be exactly what anybody objective, nonpartisan was calling out, that those people were the swamp. They are the creatures we're trying to avoid. Now we're doing the same thing again. The good analogy for those that come from the left on this is Citibank Obama. That's what this is here. That's Thiel, Palantir, Elon Musk, all these overlaps, basically controlling the interest of what goes forward through this. And you can see that the Vance is in my opinion, a complete puppet of Thiel and this whole conversation. He's, as we said before, he's somebody who's a never Trumper, clearly doesn't like Trump, said that many times. He's basically pro all the things that the Republicans just got done fighting through COVID-19, at least in many ways that he'll change his narratives about now. And now suddenly he's being positioned beside Trump, which, as we understand it, Thiel's the one that set that meeting up. He's the one that smoothed this over. He's the one that put this in place. He also largely funds Trump's campaign. Why does this not worry people on the right? Thiel is directly, he's Palantir. Palantir is, as Whitney puts it, a CIA entity. And this is an entity that is involved with the surveillance of Americans. And she talks about Main Core, and going back even before that to people that have followed Corbett's work in the past, total information awareness, LifeLog, all these conversations that's what Palantir is today, that are designed to just map out your life, who you're going to date, what you're going to watch that day, like understanding who you are at an artificial intelligence level, algorithmically, and then use that to what? From a Republican side, if you're listening out there, what do you think that amounts to? This is not a left or a right agenda. This is happening through the right administration at this point. And we just saw the SAVE Act, in my opinion, a Trojan horse for digital IDs, using the Real ID Act conversation. So you've got all these different elements coming together to push the exact same thing that they were just fighting under the context that Biden's administration was pushing it, right? And so all that stuff comes together to surveil Americans for control. And I think the problem is as she highlights with Main Core, or just thinking about like the continuity of government conversation, there are lists that they have of people that are an issue for the empire.
Yep.
We are on that list. And most of them, as she points out, are Republicans, constitutionalists, people that own guns. And that is coming through the Trump's administration direction. Now, whether or not you think that somehow he's going to be able to change that, and these are these kind of wishful thinking, naive kind of perspectives that somehow him being there is the best we can hope for, or whatever, it just blows my mind that we're still blindly going forward with a grouping that is diametrically opposed to anything Republicans would say they support. And that worries the hell out of me. Then you can come back to the point of the conversation today and recognize that what has all this done? Cemented that support for people that are counter to their prime interests. That's concerning.
Yeah, I agree with JD Vance being concerning. I'm just going to take one point you made and pull it out because there's a clip. I think you posted as you might have been the one who posted it or reposted. That's Whitney Webb talking with Jimmy Dore, where they talk about the origins of Palantir is Total Information Awareness, TIA. This came out during the George W. administration, not long after 9/11, under convicted criminal John Poindexter, who was convicted of crimes that stem back to the Iran-Contra age from a decade or two before. And they actually brought it out, TIA, with the huge pyramid with the all-seeing eye on it. This was the government logo. Immediately, everybody, all the way to the ACLU, said, you can't do this. This is illegal. They said, okay, it is. Okay, we're going to shut it down. But what they did is they privatized it. And it got privatized into a company called Palantir. And Palantir was founded by Peter Thiel. And Thiel, his number one client is the CIA. That's not a secret. And this Total Information Awareness, knowing everywhere that we go, is now under Peter Thiel, who is, I say, the fiscal sponsor of J.D. Vance, who's now placed into a very important vice president position. So it is, if you're a Trump supporter, whoever you do support, I respect your opinions for sure. But please look into J.D. Vance. Please look into what he represents, because, man, I mean, at bare minimum, I would say that's a Trojan horse. That just seems to have just been just like swooped in right there. And people aren't paying attention to it as well as they would have had J13 not happened.
Real quick, where do I post? I don't use spaces that often. Isn't there a mechanism by which I can post a link that shows up with the space? Isn't that on here?
I think that's the, if you look on the bottom right, there's a little reply, like thought bubble. Do you see that? It says 19 right now.
Yeah.
If you put that in, I think that makes a reply, I think, to the tweet. If you click on there, it shows some different things. So yeah, you can put that in and people can access it.
I thought there was a way. I did this once earlier. I might have taken the future away, where you can bring it up like on the space window, where it tags it to the top of the conversation. It doesn't matter. I don't want to derail it anymore. But I was just going to post the link to that conversation you were talking about, the clip we did of Whitney and Jimmy. I'll post it beneath the actual the spaces for you guys to check out. It's an important conversation, and you did a great job describing that. And I think if anybody wants to know more about it, Whitney Webb is the place to go, because she's been nailing this down for a long time, and it's everything they think they're fighting. That's important to think about.
Yes, 100%. I agree completely. So let's go to one or two more speakers. We don't have hands up, but we have people speaking. If anybody wants to have a question, we can do that. We'll probably do maybe about 10 more minutes here and wrap up, because we've got a long, amazing conversation. Just so people know, a lot of people didn't. This was supposed to be on a link that had been promoted to thousands and thousands of people over the past 3 or 4 days, and that was completely shut down. Cafecito Break tried to put that up through Rose Angel, and now not only was she not able to run any spaces today, when I tried to make her the co-host, I can't make her the co-host for some reason. So these could just be those X space anomalies, but it does have the feeling of not wanting this conversation to happen. Liam, if you could come on, and actually another friend of mine who is a brilliant researcher. Thanks for being here. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Michael, thank you for the kind words, and right back at you. And of course, same to you, Ryan, follower of your work as well. And I really appreciate what you do. You know, you apply a process of investigation and inquiry rather than simply offering statements or prefabricated conclusions, which is ever more important these days. So thank you for hosting this space, and I'll keep it really, really brief so we can keep this moving. A big part of what everyone is doing in trying to figure out what happened is really analyzing behavior. And one of the things that I think isn't necessarily being talked about enough is the effect of shock and adrenaline and trauma on people's behavior. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, and specifically like when we're looking at people behind Trump. If you look, there are people who seem to just be standing there either filming or not reacting at all, and that's raised some questions. Then you get to analyzing Trump's behavior, the behavior of the Secret Service. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring up on the topic of who benefits, separating conspirators, hypothetical conspirators, from opportunists. I think we're seeing a lot of behavior after the fact that could well be evidence of foreknowledge or conspiracy, or could simply be those seeking to take advantage of this political and potentially commercial firestorm. So I just wanted to offer those two kind of subtopics for you to chew on if you wanted.
Absolutely, man. It's an excellent point. It really is an important point about this. Is that, and this gets into the weeds though. And this again, if people are resistant to holding off until they have more evidence, this is the kind of thing that gets people to eyes glaze over and they look for someone screaming from a rooftop. They have the answer with no evidence, right? But it's an important thing to think about. Is that there are people within this in varying degrees that will lie to you. Right. Some of them that are doing this just because they love to see things get disrupted, love to see people freak out. That's just a troll. Right. Then you got people that might step into this and just recognize an opportunity, as you discussed, opportunists that want to come in and just go, look, if I place this in here right now, I might get a lot of support. I might get a lot of surge of donations. I might get more attention. Right. Or another element of it, I see this a lot on the right now, and I don't have to point people out, is that they come in and they'll go, oh, well, it clearly seems that like Joe Biden is sick. There's a kind of narrative going right now that he is struggling and they want to hide that. So you get people that will jump out and go, my sources confirmed he's actually dead, and this happens all the time. And that could be somebody that actually has a source, and that source could also be wrong. Or it could be somebody that doesn't have a source and they just dump that out there in hopes that it turns out that he dies and they could look like the person that was out of the story. Right. So there's all these different levels of this. And so the point is, the only way to engage with this kind of a field and not lose your mind and come and actually seek the truth is to just be objective and question everything that comes across your plate. It doesn't mean deny anything. It means entertain everything and equally criticize all. Doesn't matter who it comes from, and so, and that equally probably makes people see, oh, that's too much work and whatever. Well, then you don't really care enough about the truth, and that's okay. Nobody has to care about the truth. But I think that's important, Liam, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because there's a lot of that happening. Like taking the fake video we saw. If nobody stepped up to claim that.
Yeah.
So to me, that suggests an opportunity, an interest of trying to derail the conversation. So to me, that's either a troll to watch how the thing goes crazy, or an actual attempt to try to mislead people for the agenda. I wouldn't argue that would be an opportunist, because no one's trying to get an opportunity out of it. So it's important to think about it. So I'm glad you brought that up, Liam. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Heather, you have your hand up. Heather has been fighting for medical freedom in New York City for a long, long time. Thanks for joining us, Heather. What's your question?
Real quick, let's go with Heather next, but then jump back to DVS. He's been waiting a while. He's been wanting to follow up. So go ahead, Heather, and we'll go to DVS next, if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Michael, for questioning, because when this all happened, I was watching it live. I'm from the Pittsburgh area, used to go to Butler often with my family. So it was like creepy that it was basically in my backyard. But, as a professional actor, right away, I was looking at the replays of the people behind Trump. And I'm in a group of actors that are actively trying to sue SAG-AFTRA, and we're really smart. And we just did a Zoom, kind of like what we're doing with Dr. Rima and Jim Fetzer. And we slowed down the video behind Trump and looked at all these characters. And in particular, there are two, well, there are many, looking at their phone. They're not afraid. They're not ducking, but they're looking at their phone, kind of gesturing to the others. One woman looks at her phone very specifically and then does the sign of the cross. Diagonally above her, another woman looks at her phone and does the sign of the cross. These are not organic things that a human would do when faced with bullets and possible more bullets and a president going down. So we as professional actors are looking at this, as all of you are, questioning everything, and not from a political place, from humanity. And we also had somebody who was talking about the Bible, which I think is important, because we have a lot of people. I'm Catholic, but I'm not going to say flat out that Trump was saved and then these other people weren't. So that's really important that we're hearing that. And I think that has to be questioned too. And again, I agree with everybody saying about, we need to see this ear that was pierced. I do think it's very possible it could have been fully staged. Do I know? No, of course I don't know, but I am questioning it. And I think it's very possible based on all of the past false flags that we've all seen. Um, this one, I mean, we can flat out see those people behind him that just don't look right. So I don't know what you think, Ryan, but look at, if you've looked at all those people behind him, analyzed them as an actor might, like we have, and we're seeing some very strange bad acting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would first say that I think it's a dangerous endeavor to try to decide whose reactions are legitimate and not. I think it's a good point to bring up, and it's something to. I've also seen some weird examples of some of these people that just, in my opinion, with what we see happening, that the way they respond doesn't seem to add up. The way they respond, but as I've learned this in these events in the past, where people that deal with trauma, we all deal with it in very different ways. The way we respond, our emotions, and so these are things you take note of, like you're doing, and we keep it there and we look forward. But like, like for somebody laughing, for example, at a time when you wouldn't laugh, people are. I am one. I'll speak for myself that in certain situations, I have a hard time dealing with certain like with death, for example. I have a really hard time. I kind of shut down. I don't really engage. And so it's just a lot of times people take that the wrong way. And so I get how people react in the way that they feel makes sense. But that being said, the idea of it, like first I would say that the idea of the cross and seeing more than one of them, that's interesting. I mean, and what are they looking on their phone? What's being sent? And this does interestingly overlap with this whole saved by God narrative, which again, it's like, that's certainly for each individual to come to their own personal conclusion about. But to somehow come out and say that we know that, and it's like this running narrative that like God saved his life, this is my point as a Christian myself about why I think it's very dangerous to overlap journalism and religion. I mean, it's not even dangerous. It's irresponsible. You're talking about something that is about faith and basing it on your personal faith and then overlapping it with something that demands evidence and proof.
Right.
And it's that's just bad journalism, quite frankly. Now I'm a Christian. You're allowed to be a Christian and do journalism. I just don't think you can overlap that with your personal religious opinions and then push ideas about political assassinations. That's dangerous,
Totally. Yeah.
Oh, and then the point about the crowd and stuff. Liam brought this up as well. I just didn't go to it. He pointed out like the adrenaline and how people react and so on. It is interesting because it's what's going on there. There were people that were discussing this as that they thought it was fireworks, and so it's hard to know what they thought was happening until then they rush the crowd and they jump on him. There were a couple of people that I just did think was interesting that they didn't seem to care at a point when everybody else was like hiding and cowering and they were just standing there. But I got to point out that today, like if this would have happened outside of like the cell phone era, you might have been able to argue that they just didn't believe it, or rather that it would be more of anomalous, to put it that way. But today, with the way that people act with their phones, and it wouldn't surprise me that there are just certain generations out there that they may well not even know what's going on. They're so invested in what's on their phone, so there's always different possibilities for why they acted that way. But I think it's worthy of pointing out. And then the idea of, have you guys seen the prophecy? The guy that said this in March. There's a video going around.
Yes. That's crazy.
And as it goes forward, now the eardrum thing hasn't happened, right? But as it goes forward, it is pretty interesting that now you've got, I think, Trump either seeing that out or intentionally leaning into it, where he's now put out an image of himself in front of I forget what building, holding the Bible, kind of a weird way, so you can see that it says Holy Bible on the book, and it's like saying that he's now found God renewed because of this. And it's like, it really does worry me, especially as a Christian, because I think we can look back at Trump and what he's written about. I frankly, look, I'm not going to begrudge or discount the idea that somebody may have just, especially something like this, if you believe it was a real attempt on his life, or at least he thinks that very well might find God in that. But let's remember that what he's expressed in the past, what he's done, you don't support a genocide or assassinate people under the cloak of diplomacy or carry out attempted coup attempts on Venezuela that kill lots of people if you're a godly person, in my opinion. But at the same time, he's stated otherwise, right? That he was a Democrat or that he doesn't believe, that now has changed. So I caution people from being swayed by those kind of things. So I just wanted to bring that overlap into the prophecy aspect of it that very well could be him leaning into it. You know, I find it interesting.
I just want to say, DVS, I sent an invite to you to come on and speak to have your follow up, but you haven't accepted that. I'm not sure. This has been a very buggy spaces, as we said from the beginning.
We have
so,
Layla as well, or Layla, how you say that? He's been waiting.
Yeah, and well, we have a couple that I've already invited in and are waiting. Let's we'll get to him in a second. But New York Freedom Rally, why don't you come on and ask a question?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can.
I just want to say thank you, Ryan. You know, I was listening to you and Whitney and so many others ever since before 2020 and the COVID scam. You played such a pivotal role. I know for thousands of people just to really put on that critical lens and see the forest over the trees beyond the, and aligning yourself with a party or a politician, but just acknowledging what we don't know and just being okay with the fact that we don't know. And I think all of us here should be, in my opinion, emotionally prepared for the fact that we're never going to know for certain about any of this, about what transpired on the 13th. But it's just so.
Hold on.
There's an echo happening.
DBS, let him finish, and then we'll come back to you after he's done.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
So it's just so great to you've built a great platform, and just to take the time to share the space with so many powerful leaders in medical freedom who've been, I'm just so honored to call friends and family in New York. But my takeaway, and I guess my question I would pose is, whatever the truth is, which we may not ever know, you mentioned Bobby Kennedy earlier, and that's kind of an X factor as far as the election goes. I share your opinion that our votes aren't even counted legitimately with the electronic machines and whatnot. But given what happened to the previous two members of the Kennedy previous generation, thank God Trump is alive. I'm not like a huge Trump fan. I consider him culpable with COVID, with the rollout of 5G, but this country would be a complete mess, to put it lightly, if he was killed that day. So thank God that he's alive. But I guess my takeaway and my question is, what are the odds, do you think, of some kind of referendum on the intelligence agencies who at least allowed this to happen? I guess we can say, if not staged it. Whatever the case is, do you think there's a chance of an overhaul, a bipartisan overhaul of the intelligence agencies and their role in these kinds of false flags? Again, whatever the truth is, you see what I'm getting at with the truth behind Kennedy, JFK and Bobby Kennedy Sr., and whatever happened with Trump. Can this lead to some meaningful overhaul and gutting, God willing, gutting the intelligence agencies?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you two answers. I'll give you the pessimistic answer, and I'll give you the optimistic answer. Okay. So I think that from the optimistic answer, this would be under the assumption that these are, different opinions, different entities, different opinions, that it's not just kind of one unified control structure, that ultimately that there might be members of Congress, members of the Senate, the House, or whatever else, who are trying to positively change the country. Right. So that being the assumptive reality, that this very well could seemingly lead to something that might ultimately change that control, the wildly unaccountable reality of the even the intelligence entities that we're aware of, let alone the ones that we don't even know about, right? The idea this is so far out of control that maybe this is something that they want to pull rein back in, and that this might be an event that could be used to rally that, because we did see a lot of them asking for the same things all together in regard to Cheadle at the very least. Now, I'd like to believe that's possible, but I think you guys know where I'm going to go with this, is that I think that the sad reality, and look, if we really want to solve problems, we need to be honest with ourselves about the reality, that I think it's pretty clear that what we're dealing with is not individuals, individually fighting for things. I think that we're dealing with something much more nefarious. And I think that what we're seeing is the evidence that these people are acting out things in front of us. But that doesn't have to mean that the whole thing was staged, but just whatever we're talking about, carrying out events, orchestrating things, allowing them to happen, whatever you want to look at, for the interest of keeping us in a place where we don't recognize that we're not being led by what we think we are. And I think that if we address that cold reality, then that kind of boxes out the possibility that we'll have some kind of the term bipartisan doesn't exist outside of wedge issues and political dynamics that are about division, And again, I'd like to believe there's probably somewhere in the middle, but I think that doing this long enough, it's hard we just keep coming back around to the same problem. We're in the same hamster wheel, whatever analogy you want to use, where we just never seem to get past the same things. The same people who end up in the same positions, and they promise the world and deliver just enough to keep you invested in the same thing. And so I think it's very hard to think that we're going to see that change. I'd like to believe that, but all I would caution is that we just take it one step at a time. And as individuals, don't lean into the partisan of it all. If we really want to see that, if we want to see, the same CIA involved with the JFK assassination and involved with coups around the world start actually being shattered to a million pieces, then we need to continue to fight for that from a nonpartisan objective position, one by one, and not president by president, but by actual policy decision by policy decision, right? Actually discuss this at a level of immediate action and try to see these things build and actually see change happen. My point would be that never happens because we see even for crying out loud, this AOC called this out in the hearing. Well, what do we get from this? And I don't support her at all. We get the same thing. We want an independent investigation, and then they deliver way less than they promised they would, and then nothing ever happens. That happens on both sides. So I think that shows us that they really don't want anything to change. They're happy to call it out to get a couple of political benefits in that moment, but it just cycles all the way back through. So until we can see past that division, we'll never see any real change. And I know I say this all the time, but I stand by it. I think it's very obvious. So I hope you're right. I hope that, or at least whoever might think that, I hope they're right. But I think we need to, flavor that with the reality.
We're going to try to get through 2 or 3 more questions, but we're approaching 2-hour point here. Ryan, thank you so much for being so generous with your time to go through these questions. Let's have DVS. DVS, you wanted a follow-up question.
Hey, how good can you guys hear me?
Really good right now.
Okay, great. All right, so real quick, Anna Paulina, by the way, she did mention Anna Paulina and a few others, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, she did mention the shooter on the water tower and other shooters in the hearing to the Secret Service director. So that was talked about, other shooters. You guys mentioned that before. Now earlier I was talking about Trump's humanity and things that I believe in his human nature. I was leading up to just getting that out the way, because when you start to get weighed down by how much the system has lied to us and how much we've been awakened to and how much corruption there is, we no longer can see with the things that are easiest for us to see truth with. And that is the things that we've always been able to catch on to, and that is vibes and looking at the character of a person and seeing all those little details in the background. On top of who Trump is, remaining the same person who has always been about the same topics. Yes, he's changed on certain topics, but not like the way that I'm talking about. Like you've seen Joe Biden have a political stance on absolutely against same-sex marriage, and then before it, and then be against it, and then before it. And this happens with all of, and I'm going to say it, straight up, I am not partisan. I do not believe in Democrats at all. I am a 100% Republican, and I will never, ever vote for a Democrat. So that is my stance. And I don't trust Republicans either, but I do know that the Republicans' stance, at least what they claim to be for, is what I am for. And so it's harder for Republicans. They have to hide under that banner of the things that I stand for and the values that I have. They have to hide under that at least. And they have to fake it at least, even the rhinos. But Democrats are what they are. They claim it and are very loud and proud about it. And I am against all Democrat policies to the full. And I will never vote for Democrats, so I am not partisan. So back to what I'm saying about Trump.
That would be partisan. That's the definition of partisan, just so we're clear.
Right. That's what I meant. Sorry. With the things that happened along the line with Trump and with the assassination attempt, and also the fact that J.D. Vance was suspiciously, announced as VP 48 hours after the assassination attempt, I don't find that suspicious at all, because we've been waiting for that revelation of who the VP is, and it was supposed to be at the RNC. What I find more strange is that they bet against Trump's True Social and his and Rumble the day before the assassination attempt, and they bet millions on it. Millions of dollars were bet in stocks against and shorted. They did a short on Trump's True Social and Rumble, and so there was a pre-plan for Trump to be dead before the RNC, so that he doesn't announce JD Vance, and so that Nikki Haley, which seems to be the usual suspect for me right now, Nikki Haley was what they were hoping could be the nominee and would be announced at the RNC convention, because Trump was supposed to be dead. And everything aligns with that, including the CrowdStrike cyber attack, and all that stuff. And now back to the actual assassination attempt being a plot, possibly from Trump being involved in it and knowing it was going to happen, or not knowing, but being part of the plan for his favor. I don't see that at all. I don't see any opportunity for that, because one, his head turned at the right time. He could have actually been dead with the attempt, and people actually died. And there's a lot going on with the side that we're all against being exposed as the potential culprit. The ones we always talk about, the ones even the Q or the Illuminati believers or the conspiracy theorists, we all talk about the people who are being exposed. So if it is their plan to control us, and both sides are a part of the same party, and they all want to control us, they're losing miserably, because they're being exposed, and the people who are winning the narrative and winning the minds of the general population of the United States is the ones who stand for what we all stand for, and that is pro-gun, pro-life, pro-Christianity, pro-religion, pro-freedom of religion, pro-freedom of, all of this stuff. The stuff that we want is what's winning the general population of the United States.
DVS, we're gonna leave it there and move on to Ryan's response to that. And I just want to say, you should go back and listen to the beginning of this Spaces after I save it and put it out, because we talked a lot about the head move and the lineup of the shot. But we're gonna have to leave it there. And Ryan, why don't you respond to that?
Yeah, I appreciate your impassioned opinion. I just think that, what you laid out for the most part is the narrative, right? It certainly could be the case, but I think the angle, I think we already went down pretty clearly. But I kind of reject the we all framing, because I guarantee there are people in this very chat that disagree with a lot of what you said, or that believe in different things about guns or whatever else, because hopefully this conversation is not about partisan stances. It's about objectively looking at the reality. And I would argue that people in this chat have a lot of different stances on a lot of different things, and we just recognize that's okay, right? But to the larger point about it is just that I think that our emotional opinions end up leading us in a way that we ignore what we don't want to see, where it affects what we think, and we agree with things that might not even be fleshed out enough, because it also aligns what we think. And I think that's what we're demonstrating right there, is that that you don't know whether the Republicans think what they're saying, but you agree that what they're saying aligns with you. But then you know that what the Democrats are saying are what they think. I don't know how we know any of that. These are all politicians. They're all saying what they, and then it could be what they want you to think they think, or it could be what they need to say to achieve the larger agenda, which is what I think about the government, not the left or the right. This idea that the Democrats are fighting the Republicans, the Republicans are, I don't believe that. I can, of course, be wrong. But I think the evidence over a very long period of time continues to show this cycle that always leads in the same direction. And they are happiest when we are at each other's throats, screaming about wedge issues, missing the larger point. Those wedge issues are important, guys. Everything matters. And I'm not going to say what you should care about more than something else. But what I can see, I should say, from this long-term perception is that they have, as the power structure, been aiming in the same direction for as far back as I can look. And right now is one of those moments where I see it coalescing around this in an alarming way. Now, yeah, that could be because they screwed up and that Trump was going to be a problem, and it didn't work, and now everyone's surging in that support. But I think what's important is we stand back and, let's just say, like right now, we need to keep fleshing this out, keep investigating, keep questioning. But let's say we go forward 5 years and we look back, and everything that follows this continues to lead in the direction and that this was the plan, then we need to look back at this event to continue to go, well, maybe that was how that went. Like, let's not forget about the idea of what even from on the right. And that's another point to make, by the way, that we didn't address. On the right of this conversation, the opinions are so varied, it blows my mind. From the Q side of this that argues that it was actually fake for the interest of Trump. And then you got people that are saying that it was fake, but it was Trump pretending. And there's even on the Republican side saying that. It blows my mind how multifaceted it is, which just shows you where we are today, and the people that are quick to lean into what their assumptions are as fact, and that's everywhere, But the larger point being simply that I think what we need to continue to question this entire event as it goes forward, because I think the more we see how this lines up afterward, it will continue to allow us to question the first event. But my point was going to be on top of that, we shouldn't, that's what I was going, is the Republican, one of them, the opinions is that this was the deep state simply going, we want you to be president, or whoever you think is shooting, but we need to make sure that you don't step out of line again. Now that's more of a two-party illusion opinion that would justify the idea that this was a threat. And, then the conversation is how would they have made sure they shot his ear? And, on that point, and I'll just quickly, it's certainly possible. It's not that far out of the realm of possibility that a very good shooter could make sure they did that. I know that's wildly unacceptable in the conversation, but it is the truth if we understand how good some shooters can be. I don't think that's what happened, but I think that it's interesting to think about how that might have gone, or it could have been a fake in regard to not a bullet, or it could have been a shoot that, something else. We just don't have that proven, in my opinion, yet. So all that's to say that, we should avoid the emotion in all of this. And I think that's clear.
We have just hit the 2-hour mark. I'm going to close the question here with Kristen Elizabeth. This is from Beyond the Maze on Substack, one of the best researchers that I know. Kristen, unmute yourself. You got the last question. Ask Ryan.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you, Michael. That's very kind. And I definitely would repeat all of the kind things shared by everyone back at all of you guys. I just wanted to piggyback on New York Freedom Rally's question about overhauling federal agencies, because for me that's probably the most interesting thread that I've been pulling on this whole time. And it actually started with 2 weeks before J13 seeing an article in Real Clear Defense is the name of the publication, written by Stuart Scheller, who's like a somewhat well-known former Marine commander who came out very publicly during the botched withdrawal out of Afghanistan, calling out the superiors in the military and the government for their mismanagement. And he somewhat famously was, I believe, dishonorably discharged and even like imprisoned for a period. And he wrote an article presenting the case that Eric Prince should become the next Secretary of Defense, and actually laying out in quite a bit of detail Eric Prince's proposal for overhauling the military. And we know that Eric Prince has wanted to privatize the military for a long time. And so one of the interesting things that happened on January 13th was, by the end of that night, Eric Prince had what definitely looked to me like a very, very inorganic, meteoric rise on X, where thousands and thousands and thousands of people, some, ignited by influencers with massive platforms, followed by lesser, known people, followed by bots. He went really viral really quickly, and he put out a statement, in response to the Secret Service failures, and it was all very technical what he said they should have done and could have done, and that was picked up by Zero Hedge, and an entire article was published featuring him. And my understanding is that recently, just a couple days ago, Alex Jones said during a live that Eric Prince actually at this point has been somehow brought in to play a role in Trump's protective services, whatever that means. And so I think this question of rightfully demonizing the federal agencies and having these questions about them being bloated and incapable or partisan and all of these things makes a lot of sense, but it's creating a vacuum and being brought out into the public arena of discussion really rapidly in a way where I think the concern is like what fills the vacuum. And
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that, like you're saying, Ryan, down the road, whatever happens within that sphere of overhauling or completely gutting and rebuilding, whatever that winds up looking like, will actually give us more of an idea of what January 13th was really all about.
Ryan.
Or
Well,
July,
it's a
yeah.
comment, not a question, a comment, but I just wanted to submit
Well,
that.
Ryan,
Yeah, no,
please
that's
respond to that, Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And by the way, it's funny you just said January on accident because I was just thinking about how
Oh.
interesting it is that we're using J6 and J13. And I'm thinking, is there a reason that's the case? And I was like, that might get confused with January. And then you literally said January. It's just funny that, you know, I'm so resistant to all these like acronyms and shortening of things. It just it kills me. But so obviously we're talking about July, just in case anybody's confused by that. But you make a great point about you know, Eric Prince is a really alarming character in all of this. It really is. He's one of these people that, you know, for whether we're talking about Afghanistan or any effort he's tried to privatize previous wars, the idea of like you know, these are mercenaries, right? I mean, that's what at the face value anyway. There's plenty more going on behind the scenes. It's an alarming entity that has been responsible and behind and involved with some terrible things in the past and currently. I mean, right now he's publicly praising and boasting about giving Israel the technology to flood Gaza, which is causing horrendous disease spreading and all sorts of terrible things, sewage. I mean, and he's boasting about that. You know, so this idea that he somehow is the right choice. Why? Because he supports the Republicans. This is what we get from the blind partisanship. You know, this guy is an objectively dangerous character, whatever side you're on. And yet they just are blinded to it like Vance and the rest of it, you know, and that's what's so dangerous about falling in with these camps. But to your point about how that can happen, you know, that it's sort of a problem reaction solution dynamic, right? Where you recognize that the intelligence entities are a problem, but I think, in my opinion, it's obvious that that's a problem that benefits the establishment. So they know we don't like it. They start to see that we're pointing it out. And so what do? Manufacture a reason to change it, but in the way that they want. Right. So they let you point the problem out and they go, don't worry, here's Eric Prince, we'll fill that gap, you know, and people support it. And then suddenly we're in a worse position than we were before. Privatized to the point. And basically all that will amount to is giving Prince or whatever entity he's running the assets that come along with the government and the impunity that comes along with the government position, you know, and that is terrifying. I mean, our government doesn't care about any of that, as we can see with their regime change and overthrows around the world. Just imagine if it was somebody like this. You know, so that really does concern me. And I think I actually didn't think about that when it was previously asked about the intelligence part of it. That's a great thing to consider. I just am coming from the position of, you know, that kind of adds to my point is that's what I would expect. It's like we get to this position where we want these changes. And those are usually moments where the establishment uses our hope for something more dangerous. That's not a call to not fight or push for change. It's just that we need to be aware that happens and not fall for the presented change that's not really change, but, you know, a detriment.
Yeah, 100%. Great, excellent final question for us to close out on. This was a long spaces, almost 2 hours, but man, it was really worth the whole long ride. If you came in the middle, once I save this and push this out, I encourage you, listen from the very beginning, share it with people. We went through a lot of important information. Everyone should be following The Last American Vagabond, Ryan Cristián, who was the featured speaker here on this Spaces. And Ryan, I mean, I hope we can do this again or even on another platform. I'd love to engage you on some other topics beyond just what happened in the Trump assassination attempt in the future. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time and just for your great research on this. It's we really appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate the time, guys. And I think these conversations are paramount. We need more nonpartisan, objective conversation, you know, and it shouldn't surprise anybody that it gets less engagement than the, you know, hyperbolic, I've got the answer, my secret sources say kind of conversations that are everywhere, because I get it. It's entertaining. It's fun.
Well,
but
well,
if we
also,
actually care about the truth.
Well, Brian, on that point, I want to say we had thousands of people that were viewing the original link for this X Spaces, and it could not work when it happened. Rose Angel of Cafecito Break, she did a Spaces last night. She does Spaces all the time. When she turned this one on 3 times, it locked her out. Wouldn't even let me make her a co-host. So I wouldn't assume that the engagement and the participation of people here is truly organically the number of people that really did want to be here. It could have just been a glitch, but we're in weird spaces, and your research, I feel, is so important. I would not be surprised if they were trying to suppress how many people could hear it.
Well, thank you for saying.
And also too, Ryan, just briefly to say, I want to say thank you for saying yes to this space. And you right away, you said I'm in. And I have to tell you that as someone who has worn both hats in the professional media industry and production to being an independent content creator, it's when you are around a lot of people who quote unquote think that they have big influences, and maybe they do, but when you have access to them and none of them respond to you, and you could have been someone who were like, no, I don't know who this person is, and you said yes right away. I have to say thank you so much. That just speaks so much to your character. I do apologize to everyone for our tech glitch. People who, one of the reasons that Cafecito Break has gotten even the attention of people in the freedom movement in New York back in 2020 is that they realized how many times our page was getting taken down despite how tiny we were as a channel. And the only thing that I was led to conclude is that they're really there's a sabotage when they realize, the connection. You were talking about how easy it is to track who's everyone connected to, and I quickly realized in those 2020 eras that my communications privately were being messed with. And uh one of the first things that I ever hosted was a conversation on 9/11 where architects and engineers, founder Richard
Right.
Gage. And so maybe we, all of us have been on everybody's radar. So I really would love to have a part 2 of this when, maybe in a few weeks, if that's okay with everyone, and when I could talk to Michael and we can do it via video so we can also present evidence. And if DVS has new evidence or someone has more of the things that we're looking for, let's not be emotional about it, no matter what side you find yourselves. To me, I feel like this is a conversation for the history books, and I really thank you to all of you for your presence. And please subscribe and share this space. And we at Cafecito Break will repurpose this, and this will be on our Rumble and YouTube channels. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. And again, just thanks for putting this together. I think these are paramount, and I'm glad that we took the time to talk about this. There's plenty more we could get into. And just for the record, I wasn't necessarily indicating that there was low engagement on this show. I think I don't really do these that often, so I don't know how much it gets. I'm just making the general point that this will, regardless of whether, and that is unfortunate that probably was suppression, shutting this down at the beginning, but just that it'll always get less because we are doing this in a way that is not as flashy and exciting. We're doing it the way that I argue it's supposed to be done: research and objective investigation, and we'll hopefully find something more. And if not, then we'll leave it there. And that's how it has to be. But thanks again, guys, for having me on. I think I think that you guys are doing what we need to be doing in this field. So thank you. And I would like to actually throw it last, if you could, for me, teachers, to Lele down there. He had his hand up, and I think he wanted to say something. Let's not give it a question or anything since we're wrapping up. But Lele, if you want to say anything on the way out, go ahead, brother, because I know you've had your hand raised for a while. Can we do that, teacher? Is that okay?
Yeah, Lele, you're in.
Hey, thanks again, Ryan. This is the first time I've seen you on Spaces. I hope you do this more often. You're like a voice above, you're the cream of the crop, my brother. One thing I think would have been nice to kind of touch on during this whole topic is you talk about this all often, about revolving doors, common denominators between both administrations, and also I forgot the name of the operation, but it might have been Paperclip or Mockingbird, where it's government policy to deceive the public. So I mean, all of this, when you take it into account and you don't, and you still accept the mainstream narrative, then means you're just not, you're not, I don't want to sound offensive, but you're not, you're not educated enough to know that they're lying to you, because they openly admit it, that they have to. So thanks again. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. And I do think it's important to just question it, like recognize that our governments have been lying to us about a lot, not one side or the other, but our government. So I appreciate the point. And again, teachers, Cafecito, thanks, guys. And let's definitely try to do it again in the future. Just reach out to me. We can set it up. So thanks, everybody, for the time and the great chiming in conversation and different points from all sides of the conversation, right? This is what we should strive for. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Question everything. See you later.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this replay. Please subscribe, share, and like. And again, this space was hosted by Cafecito Break and Teachers for Choice, Michael Kane, and our special guest, Ryan Cristián, the last American vagabond. God bless you, everyone, and we'll connect with you real soon.
Together, just like when we were in school in New York City, okay? Back in the day. All right? Put your hands on your hearts. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, fellas. What's up, everybody?
Let's go. Jimmy! Epa!
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, we're so holy we held at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight are the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glow, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, land of the free and the home of the brave. Hello, fellow freedom-loving Americans! We're all breaking the matrix.